Recording in progress.
Got it. All right, good evening. It is 7:10 p.m. Is your microphone on? No? There's a bit of an echo. I am calling the Lunenburg Finance Committee meeting to order. I apologize for us starting late. We had two members that were late tonight. I could not get out of work fast enough this evening. In accordance with the requirements of the open meeting law, please be advised that this meeting is being recorded and broadcast over the Lunenburg Public Access channel and on Facebook Live on the Public Access Facebook page, and will be uploaded to the Lunenburg Access YouTube channel after the meeting. This meeting will be held in person at the location provided on this notice. Members of the public are welcome to attend this in-person meeting. Please note that while an option for remote attendance and/or participation is being provided as a courtesy to the public, the meeting will not be suspended or terminated if technological problems interrupt the virtual broadcast unless otherwise required by law. Members of the public with particular interest in any specific item on this agenda should make plans for in-person versus virtual attendance accordingly. This agenda lists all topics which may be discussed at the meeting and are those reasonably anticipated by the chair. Votes may be taken as a result of these discussions. Not all items listed may in fact be discussed, and other items not listed may also be brought up for discussion to the extent permitted by open meeting law. Would you please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance? Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right. Do we have any announcements from the committee this evening? Fantastic. Let's open it up to public comment from the public.
Mary Foyle, 985 Flat Hill Road, but I'm actually here wearing other hats other than a resident. So I am I hope what I'm going to say, this is based on what I saw in the last meeting that you guys had, which I sadly watched at 11:30 last night, and I should have written things down, but I didn't. So I am here kind of in two roles, and I hope I'm going to inform as opposed to opine, but the first one I might slightly opine. I'm the president of the teachers union, and just this is in regards to insurance conversation that happened. So I will say one of the things that we did to prepare for negotiations this past year was to survey employees who had left. And we asked them a bunch of different reasons as to why they left. We're going to do another round of that after recent leaves. And what people said, which was interesting to me, when we asked what was the best contract benefit, health insurance was the answer as the best contract benefit. It was really interesting to me because technically it's not part of our teacher's contract. It is contractual, but not part of our teacher's contract. So now with my other hat, I happen to also be the chairperson of our PEC, our Public Employee Committee. So I'm really here with that hat on, and no one from the PEC even knows I'm going to be here. So when there's a discussion of health insurance, there are a lot of questions, and I do understand to an extent good questions about health insurance, how it works in town. There are a number of questions of like, oh, what do other unions think? How do we get these people together? So since 2009, we have had a public employee committee. Towns will either have a PEC or an IAC, an insurance advisory committee. Because we enacted Section 19 of Laws 21 through 23 or something like that, but because we are a Section 19 town, it requires that PEC, that Public Employee Committee, and not the IAC. The Public Employee Committee is made up of bargaining units and units, representative from each of that group, in town to bargain health insurance. So it is bargainable. In other places, you won't see that. We are one of the few towns where it is actually bargainable. So changes that occur do need to be bargained. It is a weighted vote. The amount of members, retirees get a 10% vote, and then the other votes are weighted by how many people are in your bargaining unit or your union. We actually meet throughout the year. In fact, I was just in a meeting Monday with the PEC and the town. So we do meet to discuss health insurance things. And we obviously meet when we negotiate because we have to. But we usually meet when It comes up with insurance rates, what premiums will be. We just met because Medicare, which I'm learning a lot more about Medicare, but Medicare, those renewal rates are in January, where the rest of us, our active plans, our renewal rates are in July. So that committee already exists, and when people are asking a lot of questions of like, oh, what can we get for feedback? How will people know about this? There actually is that structure and process in town in a committee that actually legally has to exist. And so I know I'd be more than willing to answer questions when people have them. The assistant town manager was at the meeting that we just had. We do have a health insurance consultant who, I don't think every union person would say this in other towns, but like I love Sue Shalou from Cook & Company, our health insurance person. I think she's just really honest and fair when she gives her presentations. We've already asked for certain information. We are asking for numbers. Well, the town came to us, but for numbers on what does a higher deductible plan look like if people opt into that. I'm not actually sure we're going to see the money savings that the town might want to see from that as an opt-in, but we'll wait and see what the numbers say. We've had plans where we've moved on to other prescription plans. We had to ratify that kind of mid-year in order for some of those changes to make. I will say, and Sue Shalou, the consultant, would say this too, the PEC and the town have worked really well together. Over the past, went through the bylaws because I didn't remember, because I didn't start on the PEC when it started. We've existed since the fall of 2009. And so obviously we've had lots of ups and downs in health insurance for that too. So a lot of the questions that you have, if you go back and rewatch what you had for questions, the answers are actually really readily available, and that group does exist for those discussion points to actually happen. So, thanks.
Does that group meet under open meeting law, or do they meet in private?
No, it's not under open meeting law. That's my gut answer. I don't think it is because it's never been put out to the public. I will also say too, at certain times, they're actually negotiating meetings that occur, and that wouldn't be open to the public.
Sure.
Anyways.
Okay.
But no, they have. I don't think those have to be open to the public.
Okay.
Are they posted meetings?
No, because the one we just had, we all decided when it was going to be.
Okay.
So no, they're not posted. I know. I'm trying to think. I think I've been on this committee since maybe 2011. So really, I'm the person who's the chair because I've been on the committee the longest at this point. I kind of got volunteered onto it, and now I just know more about health insurance than an average person should know, so I kind of feel like I might as well stick with it. So I know it's the town actually usually calls a meeting together for us to meet, and the town manager is often the one who does this. So we want to think about this. Sometimes the select board will ask the town manager to do it, but that was the case in our previous town manager before Heather as well, because I think she was the one who we had when this formed.
So should we be directing this letter from Mr. Leighton towards the PEC, as they would like to possibly?
I would actually direct it towards the town.
Okay, that's where it's
not
gone
the
so
PEC.
far.
Yes, and I think, and honestly, I found out what made me go back, because it's been summer, I haven't followed the town meetings quite as regularly as I usually do. We met on Monday to talk about renewal rates and things like that. The assistant town manager actually asked me, like, who is this Brian? I was like, oh, he's the chair of the school committee. I was like, why do you ask? And then she said that. So yeah, those questions really would go through that. And much of what we've discussed, like, we've discussed these things over the years. Things are always worth discussing. Like, we have an individual plan and a family plan. We do not have an employee plus one plan. And that's something that we look at every year. In our last agreement, we put in a stipend, for lack of other words, for people who have been on the health insurance, who get off the health insurance and go into someone else's, because it does save the town money. So we've been asking for numbers on that. We actually asked for the length of the contract to see how it would go, and the town said no. But then they came back and said, hey, can we do it another year? So we did ask as part of that meeting, like, what are those numbers going to look at? So we do, occasionally we've even looked at GIC. How do we compare to GIC? In the past, GIC would have not been in money savings for the town. So there's all sorts of things that we look at. Plan design, like we do, especially the officers who have been in this a bit longer, I'd say we do our due diligence of really looking at cost effectiveness across the board.
Has the PEC looked at a high deductible plan before?
We have looked, and we're on a smaller deductible now.
Right.
We have looked at the high deductible. It came up to us as something to kind of have our thinking caps on about it over the next few months, because we will start negotiating our contract this year. Probably on my union end, I have some qualms about it. Looking at it more pragmatically, my gut tells me I'm not sure we have the amount of employees to switch over to it that would actually then be a savings, because I don't see us agreeing to it at all without an HSA. And I know some of the conversation the other day, or on the 8th of the meeting, was like, it's more money in your pocket. But like, if you're actually doing it right, and I know not a lot of people do it this way, but if you're actually using your HSA right, that premium savings you have, you should actually be putting that aside so that you can use it for the rest of your deductible. So it's not as much money in your pocket. Like, it's there for an emergency, but really you should be putting that aside to make up the difference of what the HSA doesn't cover. So yeah, those are things that we have looked at. You know, on a more, I don't know, personal level, I do know employees, and I can speak more for the school side than the town on this one, have either stayed in this district or taken a job in this district for lower money because our health insurance benefit has been much better than others. Like, it's like I'd say to my students, like, weigh your benefit package. Like, it's just not the salary. So I'm heading into my 23rd year as a town employee here. I've never seen us hemorrhage employees. Like, I feel like hemorrhage is the only way I can say it. And so I'm really concerned that too many deep, substantial changes are just going to take away what at this point is one of the few benefits we have compared to other areas. Is like, my cautionary side of me has that sitting in the back of my head. But with that being said, we do look at everything.
I do say that like a high deductible with the HSA is a really good option. Like, I have that, and I was scared because, you know, the word high deductible sounds really bad.
Right.
But my financial advisor even tells me, he's like, this is like double tax advantaged. You can max it out, you can invest it, and you can use it for your entire life.
Right, and they're right, because that like rolls over differently than your FSA does, and yes, and understanding that. And, you know, part of what I would look at is, okay, and it should work this way, but like, are you paying less for co-pays? Like, looking at that whole picture
Right,
of it.
yep.
And honestly, I'm the person, probably since 2012, because the teachers, because we have the most members, it's really, others are catching up, not in a bad way, but like, it's our vote. Like, the teachers have to vote something through for it to go through. The others don't equal what the teacher vote is. It's the numbers, I'm sorry. But I think I'm a good person to be doing it. Like, I think I can be pragmatic enough. But I'm also the person who's had to go in front of the teachers, because like, when I first started here, we were 90-10 for coverage. You know, so I'm the person who's had to go before everyone and convince them to take to take this hit. Here's why you should, to take this, you know, so it's not, I'm the one who does it, I don't relish it, but I think that just shows how we can be pragmatic and move through things. And yeah, we work with the numbers and everything like that too. Yeah.
So as the discussion kind of comes around then, because right now it's with the interim town manager at this point, and it's up kind of to him about what's happening next. But I think for sure we should include this new committee that has been around for decades that I didn't even know
I would
existed.
discuss it with I would discuss it with the committee. I'm sure we would be, I would be open, but I don't want to speak for the committee. I would be open to having other people at the meeting, you know, if they want to kind of know more about that information or how we interact. You know, one of the things too that PEC instead of the IAC, we can't, and this wasn't explicitly said by anyone, but I heard like maybe undertones of it, like in the corporate world. I'm our insurance carrier, not my husband. In his corporate world, they can just change the insurance. Like, hey, July 1, here's what your insurance is going to be. We can't do that because we are contractual, and not every town can say that. If you have an IAC, you're most likely negotiating your premium split. You're not negotiating plan design. Because we're that Section 19 in the PEC, we also negotiate plan design. So it might be different if people are talking to, oh, we do it this way in this municipality. We are a rare municipality with our setup.
Okay. Thank you so much.
No problem, thank you.
Is there any other public comment from the public? All right, any public comment from the committee?
Nothing right now.
Excellent, moving along. I don't see Oh, I'm trying to get in the meeting now, if you wouldn't let me, if you would mind. I don't see our interim town manager, and he never responded to an email that I'd sent him, so I need to actually get in touch with him to,
Recording in progress.
to figure out what the plan is moving forward with him, because he hasn't indicated that he's planning to attend our meetings or anything. But I am curious. He does have some options. He's been sending me a few emails to get our opinion on some stuff, and I was hoping he would be here this evening so we could discuss some of it. But I will try and set up a meeting with him.
I know he's meeting with other boards.
I know, yeah. So I have a feeling that he will. I'm just not sure why he's not here this evening. So we do not have an interim town manager report. Do you want to skip since we're going to go right into something else? Okay. So we're going to skip the finance director report as well and go right into new business. So this past Monday, or last Monday, on the 12th, the Budget Task Force had another meeting, and one of the topics was to go over the investments and our investment strategy with all of our $27 million that we had in FY23 at the closeouts. And Izzy, I believe, got in touch with Bartholomew, one of our companies and our investment companies, and we had a meeting with them. We discussed some of the options. And then he also set up the plan to have them come here this evening just to get into a little bit more granularity with us. So we did some kind of top level stuff. We went over the 3 buckets primarily. And actually, I can pull up my notes. I was going to go over all this anyways when we had the committee reports. So the big one is, and actually let me share that slide that Izzy had sent along a while ago. There we go. Okay. So these are the 3 buckets that we can use for investing our money. Currently, we are in place. Actually, first, I'll introduce our guest here. I believe it's Chuck, correct? Okay. So Chuck Patterson is here with Bartholomew, and we have Izzy as well. So please feel free to jump in at any time when I mess up on this slide, and then we can get into a little bit more of the discussion. So currently, we are in buckets number 1 and buckets number 2, the left side and the middle section, where we are able to use our money. The left-hand bucket, you cannot invest. It is strictly for covering bills and payroll and whatnot, so you are not, those have to be in liquid assets, basically bank accounts effectively. The middle bucket, the cemetery perpetual care, stabilization fund, scholarship funds, library fund, those ones you can put into longer, I believe it was up to 3-year CDs. Is that correct?
Good evening, everyone. Mr. Chairman, the 3-year CD is in the first bucket.
The first bucket, okay.
And then the middle bucket, you can in theory buy a 30-year one.
Okay. So you can go a little bit further on that one. The third bucket we don't currently have. That requires a vote, a 203C vote, which is a little bit different now because it's recently changed the law. It used to be where town had to vote it, and then it would have to go to the House, the State House, and it would have to be approved. With the latest signing of the governor's budget, I assume, it just has to be approved by the town itself, and we can automatically be allowed to start investing some of our other funds, our OPEB and whatnot. We are not allowed to do special stabilization funds. Those are not allowed to be invested. But it would fit under what's known as affordable housing money and OPEB money as well.
Just a question, these are what are allowed under each of these buckets?
Correct.
Or this is what they're currently in?
That's what's allowed under those.
Okay.
So it's allowed by law and what we currently have. So we did also go over, is that going to change or no? Yep, there we go. We did also go over the current document that we have for FY23 about the treasurer's year-end cash report. And we sort of looked through it as well and talked about what money falls into each one of those categories. So we have category number 1, bucket number 1 fits into the checking accounts, the interest-bearing checking accounts, and then it does get into some of the liquid investments, but not all of the liquid investments, because we don't know what some of them are. All of these liquid investments under category D are banks, they're local banks with the exception of the MMDT, Massachusetts Municipal Depository Trust. But without looking at the actual accounts, we're not going to be able to figure out what investment accounts are. Some of them obviously we have a better idea, the sewer enterprise fund, the trash enterprise, the water enterprise, we know exactly what those are. So some of those can be moved currently and can be invested slightly differently without any changes to what we currently have set up with the 203C.
So letter D, liquid investment, those all, which of these 3 buckets do they?
They fall into buckets 1 and 2. It's a combination of both of those.
But none of them would fall into potentially being able to be in that 203C?
Okay, what you have there, those are your general banking accounts. And Mr. Chairman clearly articulated. It's a combination of both bucket 1 and 2. To go and invest further, you would need to go 203C in that middle bucket. The town does have OPEB, and OPEB is currently by the statute under 203C. So what Jim put up, those accounts there, in most cases, they're going to fall under bucket 1. In most cases, again, not digging in with the treasurer to find out, okay, what's this for, what's that for? I think it's pretty safe to say it's going to fall into that bucket 1, chapter 4455.
So that's for category D for the most part, our liquid investments. But that doesn't mean that all of that will. For example, the ones that we kind of touched on at the budget task force were the investment accounts where, without actually going and speaking with the treasurer and finding out exactly what those accounts are labeled to, where they're pointed towards, we don't know whether that would fall under bucket 1 or bucket number 2. But it certainly could be found out. When we get down to E, our term investments, and F, our trust funds, those, I believe, are what would fall under the 203C for the most part.
Trust funds?
Both the trust funds and the term investments, where we have OPEB in here. This is a stabilization fund, but it's not a special purpose stabilization fund.
So everything in that, your stabilization funds, your health trust, and then any of the trust funds would be in the middle bucket.
Oh, it would be, okay,
And then where you reference
OPEB.
OPEB, they're in that third bucket.
okay. So all we would really be moving, all we would really be getting with, I believe you put it as going prudent, which is approving 203C, would be able to have that OPEB in a higher yield account.
The OPEB's already there. What you would have, in the reason why the town would want to do, make the decision to go prudent, you would have your cemetery funds, your conservation funds, your scholarship funds, your miscellaneous funds would all be equal. It runs about $1.5 million. So if the town chose to go that path, they would then come out of that middle bucket and go into that prudent investor bucket.
Okay,
And getting away from the legal list.
okay. And currently, that bucket then allows us to do, we have choices with that bucket, I believe, correct? How we choose to invest. If we want to go more aggressive, that's the 70% equity, 30% bond, which is currently averaging 6 to 7%, I believe, correct?
Correct. The OPEB account currently as of June 30th, Mr. Chairman, the OPEB account had 1.4 million, and your total return on that was 5%. And currently, the town is at a 60-40 asset allocation.
Okay.
That's in the range. As treasurers have moved through this process, they will ultimately, through our recommendation, get to that 70-30 as you articulated.
Okay.
60 stocks, 40, what's the 60-40?
Very simply, it's 60% stock, 40% bonds or fixed income.
Okay.
But we could push it to a 70-30 if we wanted to be more aggressive with it. And since that is sitting there for much longer, we have the ability, we have a little bit more cushion.
Can the interest on the OPEB account only go back into the OPEB account, or can it go anywhere?
In your OPEB, in your stabilization, pretty much anything in that middle bucket and to the right. By statute, all of those funds receive their interest. Okay, so your stabilization account, any interest that's earned on the stabilization account stays with the stabilization account. Your cemetery perpetual care stays with the cemetery.
Okay.
And same with the OPEB. Same with your scholarships by statute.
Okay, so OPEB has to stay with OPEB.
Correct.
And what are the special legislation funds? Are those like the Parks Fund and stuff like that, or?
Could you repeat, please?
Well, it says, the right-hand bucket says special legislation funds. What's an example of those?
Is that the affordable housing one?
Yeah, that would be that.
Okay.
There are other funds out there that you would have special legislation, and it's spelled out in the originating legislation. Like for instance, if you had a broken trust fund or something like that, it dictates how you can invest. You know, whether you can go chapter 44, 54, or whatever's proven for a savings bank. So we're getting into the weeds there, but that's what.
What about revolving accounts?
Pardon?
Revolving accounts?
Revolving accounts would all be in that first bucket. And think of when the laws were written, whatever, and that's what we teach our treasurers, whatever is needed for daily appropriation, that has to stay. So a revolving account, you're going to need that for the Parks Department, you're going to need that for whatever other, revolving fund. So anything that you're going to budget is, yes.
I'm so sorry to interrupt this. I can't get these microphones to work. They sound horrible. We can just have you two figure out a way to
Okay.
get the microphone over there. I'm really sorry about that.
Thank you, though.
Better?
Probably.
I like this. This is easier to talk. So anything that you have or the town has that you're going to, pretty much you guys would be in charge of, would be in that first bucket. And think of it as your checking accounts. That's what those other accounts were. So cities and towns have their main depository, then they have a payroll account and accounts payable account, and then when they're not having to pay those bills, that's what all those accounts in the middle were. Those are all their money market accounts. Very common. They could have 10, 15 different banks that they're dealing with, and what the treasurers would then do is shop around for rates and then move the money accordingly. And then now you're seeing here in the world since the last probably year, 18 months, where interest rates went up so fast. For instance, the PEG account, those are all treasuries. So PEG account falls into that first bucket. So the duration on that account is a less than a quarter of a year. Okay, so I hope I answered that question.
So the left account can be invested, maybe I misunderstood this, but only in CDs and the middle in bonds, but
Okay.
can they, or can it be any mix of those?
So when you look at the left bucket,
Yeah,
you're going to have those in all liquid. So it's going to be bank money market accounts, checking accounts, CDs up to 3 years, treasuries for 1 year, agencies for 1 year. Very, very, very liquid.
what was the last one, sorry?
Government agencies, so Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, government agencies. The middle bucket have all those same securities, but there's no duration. So you could buy a bond for 30 years, then you can buy corporate bonds you couldn't buy in the first bucket, and then you can go on to that legal list. The legal list is about 20 stocks, highly concentrated. For instance, there's 20 stocks and 1/4 of them are drug companies. So there's a concentration risk that you have a quarter of the funds that the town can invest in is in one industry. Then staying in that bucket, if you chose to vote prudent, then you'd go off and pretty much invest in anything that's legal and prudent. The last bucket, OPEB, is anything prudent. So pretty much if you look at the Wall Street Journal, any of those funds, you can buy any of those. You can buy bonds from various corporations, whether it's, you know, not Amazon, Caterpillar, Bank of America. So those are the things. So it's very, very liquid, not so liquid, extremely diverse. Those are the three layouts.
Okay. But you could buy into like an S&P 500 fund or an ETF or something like that?
Correct, and you would be able to do that in the middle or the right-hand bucket.
Even the middle could go into a?
Yep. Yep, and we do. We do. So that's where you would have, you'd have funds. So if the town voted to go prudent in the middle bucket, we would buy funds. Currently, if you looked at the portfolio today, there is 20 stocks, individual stocks, because that's what it's allowed today. And that's where and why you would want to go prudent, to get away from that concentration risk.
So currently, as we stand right now, we can't go out with the middle bucket. We cannot go out and get S&P stock.
Correct.
Because we can only use those 20, or purchase those 20 different stocks.
Correct.
But if we did decide to go prudent,
To explain the local option and the change in law this year.
Sure. So to get to that new level, towns have always been able to go prudent, always. But then they would have had to come to town meeting, have town meeting vote in the affirmative, then your local state senator or state rep would then take it into Boston, present it to the House and Senate, get it through there, have the governor sign it as a home rule petition. The governor last August 9th, in the outside section of the budget, she signed it into law, the prudent investor statute for cities and towns. So here we are. That second step of going into Boston's all done for us. Now you still have to come back to town meeting to get the authorization from town meeting. So now, you know, having town meeting vote it, then you're good to go as prudent. And we have provided a copy, sample language of what it is. And pretty much all it's doing is taking Chapter 4454, that middle bucket law, and adding the section that says may allow the town to invest trust funds in a manner of prudent 203C.
Do you know if that can be done at special town meeting or only at annual town meeting?
They are doing, I'm certainly not counsel, but they are doing it, other towns are doing it at specials.
Okay. And is it usually a bylaw change?
It's really the adoption of a state law. Now, whether you convert that into a bylaw, I defer to your local government. But it's really just adopting a provision of the state law.
I think most times in the past, we've just adopted the Mass General Law. And as long as we've adopted it and that's recorded, then we're covered. That's why we always have that struggle of trying to find information as to what we've adopted and what we've put into a bylaw and what we've put into the charter. And they contradict each other sometimes because they weren't meshed together at the time.
We need a ledger of all that we don't have.
And
What's
that's
that?
common. So
Okay.
when you adopt the state law, then any subsequent changes, they automatically happen.
Right.
So it sounds prudent to move forward with this prudent investment. See what I did there?
As speaking as an investment advisor, it would be probably prudent to increase your diversification. You know, some people could say you add more risk because you have more options. I would argue that more options and more diversification actually reduces your risk. So if, for instance, like I said, that 1/4 of the list consisted of drug companies, if something happened inside that industry, how much risk would you have with the stocks that you would own because of some issue in a particular industry?
Did the state create that original list? Is that?
Sure. How long do you have? Very, very simply, the list was there for savings banks in the Commonwealth. Okay, back in the 70s, the savings banks exempted themselves from having to use the list. That left cities and towns, private trusts, and credit unions to have and manage and deal with the list. The list has not changed or changed minimally. And the only way you can add a stock or a firm to that list, believe it or not, 3 credit unions had to petition the commissioner of banks. Well, credit unions really aren't using the list. And that left that cities and towns here in the Commonwealth really are stuck with the list. So the list goes back to state chartered savings banks and then now cities and towns and private trusts. And they're reluctant, speaking to the commissioner's office, they're reluctant to make changes to the list because they don't know how many private trusts refer to it. So if you had a private trust and your trustee was going to manage your funds, they're going to manage it in accordance with the legal list. And they didn't know what the impact would be dealing with it. So long history, but I hope I summarized it.
Oh, I actually have it paused. To the trust funds?
No, I just need to spot something real quick here. Peg access stabilization.
Let's see, these are.
Well, I know where it is on that one. I just had a comparison question. There's 2 lines that I believe, and I needed to see the other one, that are described as PEG access stabilization account. The one I'm looking at right now is showing earnings of 0.75% with 720,000 and change in that account. And then there was another account, exactly the same wording, but I need that to pull down, or I need to find it to see what the interest earning on that was. There it is. Evan, back up a little bit more.
Oh, here we go.
Yeah, there it is, right there. Okay, it's in a different institution, so I probably can't get an answer as to why we're looking at what seemingly is the same bucket of money, a portion of the same bucket of money in 2 different institutions, and one's earning 3%, one's earning 0.75. Those are the things that we keyed into that we're concerned about.
So we also learned that we shouldn't be looking at interest rate. What we want to look at is the yield to maturity instead.
So what ends up happening, that is a state form that all treasurers in the Commonwealth should provide to the Commonwealth Division of Local Services in September. What you're looking at, I believe, is last September's, correct? Yes. So then, it's an education process for our treasurers. So what you might be looking at, and I do not know back in June of last year, that could have been current yield. Your current yield to maturity on that account is 4.97%. So the difference is current yield is very similar to what you would get in your local bank. You know, you see it on the street advertised. And all current yield is, and not getting into the weeds, is current income divided by current market value. That's all it is. What yield to maturity does, when we buy bonds, we might buy a bond, a $100 bond, and we might buy it at $95. Okay, but at maturity, you're going to get the extra $5. But the coupon on that might have been only 2%. But because you're going to get that extra $5, your yield to maturity is much higher. May I?
Of course, please.
So as he's digging that out, it clicks in my head that we should be, at some point, developing a spreadsheet that shows yield to maturity.
The treasurer does have that.
Yeah.
Okay,
So-
that's something I don't think we've ever seen.
Probably not.
Yep.
Probably not, because there's really no method of giving that to you unless it's developed here. So for instance, on PEG Access, as of June 30, your coupon was 0.13 basis points, but your yield to maturity was 5.15%. And then how you get that, this is an actual bond that you own. This is a U.S. Treasury that's going to mature in September 15th. We bought it at $248,385. Current price as of June 30th was $252,410. But when it matures, it's going to be $255,000. Okay, so we bought it at a
That makes
discount.
sense.
And it was, the coupon on that was 0.375. So what our team does, we're always looking at how do we maximize the income that any account gets. That's why we're buying discount coupons or discounted treasuries. Then there's another one here, and it doesn't have an interest rate. It's what they call a zero, because it's going to mature at a level. So for instance, we had one here that we bought it at $250,790, and it's going to mature at $257,000. So it doesn't pay you interest, it just grows in value. And then at the end, you get your full principal back. So what treasurers have been using on that report, because there's only one column, it says interest rate, as you saw. Even on your OPEB. Your OPEB, you know, your interest on OPEB, because we're not managing the OPEB for interest. We're managing OPEB to grow it. Okay, so the interest, we might buy mutual funds that don't pay dividends. We want it to grow. So your yield to mature, I mean, your current income might be 1%, but it's returning over 5, 6, or whatever. So similar to your mutual funds that you would own in your own portfolios. Not all your mutual funds pay a dividend. So that's what we do as a team to come up with how do we maximize your money and tie it to what you need it for. And that's why you have the 3 buckets of money. That first bucket of money is very much driven on that interest income. The middle bucket, it's kind of sort of, And then the one way over on the right, it's all driven on growth. And that's some of the notes that you see, yield to maturity, current yield, and then time-weighted return.
Excuse me. One other explanation we got, excuse me, the last time we had our financial, what's her name, Mylene in, was that, especially with the accounts that need to be very liquid, which would be the checking accounts, and I just saw a whole bunch of them here, but the ones that are paying money in and out all the time. Some of the trade-off there, she claimed, was giving up a little bit of interest to get fees waived. Is that a balancing act that,
And that is a
Is
common
prudent.
practice. That's a common practice.
okay,
Here in our industry, where you're going to get paid less of an interest rate to pay for your deposits, to pay for your checks, to do wire transfers. That is a common practice in our industry. I'm not a bank,
okay, yeah,
but that is common.
yeah. And those aren't instruments, those are just money handling instruments. I don't know what the correct term is, but,
Simple, they're regular transaction accounts.
Yeah.
In the old, I don't know if the banks still use it, DDA accounts. So you're going to have, a very low interest in your payroll and accounts payable.
Yep.
A little higher probably in your depository. So that's the account that Mylene has all her money come in and out of.
Right.
And then you have all those other accounts that you have were all money markets at the various banking institutions, and they're paying much higher.
right. Okay, that's great. I just wanted to verify that I had that correct. And then the other thing, like I said, we've keyed into these accounts that we know do not have to be fluid, such as the cemetery's perpetual care account. That's a chunk of money that we can't touch by law.
Correct.
So I would assume, if it's allowed, that should be invested aggressively as possible, but principal protected. That makes sense?
I believe that's in your trust fund account that we have.
It is.
So it is in that middle bucket.
Okay,
And currently, the town has 10% equity, 90% fixed income. If the town chose to go down the path of prudent, what we would recommend is culling out, like I said earlier when we were talking about the different items that were on that trust fund report, we leave the stabilization accounts in that account, and then take out, I believe I said like $1.4 million, bring that on over into its own separate bucket, and then we change the asset allocation from 1090 to 60/40.
okay,
And then now, as you say, you cannot spend the principal on the cemetery perpetual care. So now, if you're not going to spend principal, why not take some risk? Why not grow the principal? So yes, and what we would then do, which is kind of neat now in our world of doing this whole prudent thing for the towns, is go what we call 20 rolling quarters. Currently, towns only spend that income. Well, why not spend some growth? So if you have a stock that you bought it at $10 and now it's worth $100, there's unrealized gains in that. Well, the only way you can spend that is to actually sell it. So we want to be able to work with the towns, and then we come up with a calculation of what we call 20 rolling quarters, 5 years. And then that way there, it smooths out. If you recall years back, when interest rates were near zero, the scholarship committees or the cemetery, how come we're not getting enough money to support my budget, right? So then now if you can use, having it go prudent, and then, use 20 rolling quarters, you might be able to smooth that money that they're going to get from their funds, which then would be less withdrawal on you guys.
How do you account for that over the years, though?
We come up with a calculation. So how we would do it is, how much do you need? And then we'd we'd adjust that for inflation. And then we would target our investments to meet that. And then, so what could happen is, you have a year that you saw great growth, you're not going to spend it all. You're going to have another year that you saw negative growth. So by coming up with that average and treat it just like a real endowment, that's what you're doing. You're going to start to treat these perpetual funds as pure endowments. So that's how we would do it, and that's what is being done throughout the Commonwealth in regular endowment funds and what's community foundations or whatever. That's how they're being done now.
And towns aren't subject to like capital gains taxes and all that, right?
No, you don't pay tax.
Could probably go all night, but.
We did say that this would be a more in-depth meeting.
Do you know if like MMA or any, are they doing seminars or webinars or anything on this?
I can't
If you
speak
don't
to
know,
them.
if you don't know.
What you're seeing in this 3-bucket, that was going to be a breakout session at MMA, and then that was the year MMA at the last week canceled the MMA conference.
Okay.
So that's what that was going to be used for, to educate finance committees and powers to be. Whereas this has just happened, I do not know what the MMA's position is on it. It's law.
Yeah.
I can't speak for what their plans are in educating all of you guys.
There is a white paper that Bartholomew has put together on going prudent that they're going to distribute, I believe, to Ezzy, and we'll pass it around as well.
Right. But that's coming from us. As far as MMA, we believe it's a good thing. Speaking to the people that voted it at the State House, we made a good case, and the Mass Collector Treasurers made a good case on why treasurers in the Commonwealth needed it, or needed that legislation, not it.
Evan, do you think that'd be something that we might suggest to the Massachusetts Association of Finance Committees, where they meet twice a year? A small presentation at that meeting, I think, would reach a targeted audience, and those are all finance committee people.
And that was the intent of this presentation, and that's why we were selected to make it.
Yep.
Because it would get to the people that have an impact on budgets. And what is this law that we're doing? And what is, a lot of times, you guys were aware of it, but a lot of times people in finance committees don't understand the money. They know they have the authority to spend it, but what is it and what are the restrictions? More times than not, we'll be in a meeting and, well, why can't we own Amazon? Why can't we have 100% in the S&P 500?
Bitcoin.
Pardon?
Bitcoin?
Yeah, Bitcoin, yeah, exactly. We can't sell Bitcoin at Commonwealth, so.
Good for you.
But
How is
exactly.
Bartholomew paid? Are you paid asset under management
Yes.
or?
Yes, so for those at home in the committee, there's 2 ways advisors get paid. One way would be to have markup, and you buy a bond or something at, $95, we put it into your account at 100, that's a commission, and that's how, in the old way, that's when the pure brokers, Washington and the powers to be, didn't like that because you didn't know how much, or we didn't know how much we were paying. So now it is based off of assets under management, and what we do is we take all the assets, don't know how much we got. It's, say for, I don't know. sorry about that. You're about $7.5 million. So you probably, don't hold me to this, I can get it for you next meeting, you're probably between 35 and 40 basis points. And I will get that Ezekiel, and then he can provide it for your next meeting. I just don't have the sheet.
That's fine.
I just remembered, I do have it here. Okay, sorry about that. Okay, so call it, I was right, between 6 million and 10 million, you're at 35 basis points. Okay, probably should have a quick discussion of who we are. We are Bartholomew and Company. We're an independent investment advisory firm out of Worcester. We manage just shy of $5 billion, and the municipal aspect of that $5 million is just under $3 billion. We deal with about 325 municipal entities. So that's who we are. Our broker-dealer is Commonwealth Financial Network. They are out of Waltham, and they are the largest independent broker-dealer in the country. And then all of the town's securities are held at National Financial Services, which is a subsidiary of Fidelity. So that 35 basis points pays for your custodian, National, pays the broker-dealer, and also pays us. It covers all ticket charges, all wire fees, covers everything. And then as more money goes in, so if you got over $10 million, it goes down to 30. You go over 15 million, it goes down to 20, and 20 million, it's at 20 basis points. So we believe that and it goes back to $1. So when I was looking around, we take all the bank accounts, add it up, and then that's how we establish the fee.
That's it?
There's a lot.
I was expecting way more questions.
I could probably go for more, but I don't need to.
Chris, you're starting to get like me, you know?
The recommended draft language that was sent over for special town meeting, it's pretty simple from Bartholomew. It just says, to see if the town will vote to accept the provisions of General Law, Chapter 44, Section 54B, C, and D, to allow town trust funds to be invested in accordance with General Law, Chapter 203C, the so-called, quote, prudent investment rule, or take any other action relative thereto. So very straightforward.
Very straightforward.
Should be easy to present and explain, I think.
And the key is what you're doing is you're increasing the diversification
Right.
on your trust funds. And that's the main reason why you want to do that. And, remember, this does not affect the stabilization account or any of your other monies. So in that being said, if you took, an apples to apples comparison, you're making Sorry, not having it in front of me, I apologize. So for instance, when you're comparing apples to apples on why you want to do this, your total return on your trust funds is 2.08% versus your total return on your OPEB, and it's at 60/40, is 5%. There's your rationale.
How much is in $1.5 million?
1.4 right now.
1.4.
Remember, this is old.
Yeah, currently on June 30 is 1.4.
So quick math says we're 7.5 minus OPEB is 6 million, and we're
Yeah, so
leaving
it's
about
1.4,
300 basis points on
5.2 is your trust funds, and 756,000 in the PEG. That's your number. Your OPEB this past fiscal year did over 10. So we saw all that in our own accounts, so. And then the benchmark on OPEB that is, so we use a blended benchmark. The benchmark did 507 and you did 501 since inception. So right on the mark.
Have you seen towns that have gone prudent before, that have been able to use some of these? I know you mentioned sort of equating it to an endowment in a sense. Have you seen towns that have gone prudent, been able to, say, fully remove the investment or for the appropriation portion of funding, sort of like PEG access or OPEB or anything like that, strictly off of investments?
I cannot say that because it's really just happened a year ago, and most towns are just starting to move into it.
Or just going with the 203C in general?
I can't say. I don't know what's going to be needed from these accounts versus how much is being made now, and I would not be able to have that information.
Okay. But I think optimally, we would be able to at least say that we could reduce our need to appropriate to portions of these accounts to cover other bills that we're going to have to do for the year.
That would always be the hope.
Okay.
Yes. So in that scholarship, in that cemetery perpetual care, you know, if you're supplementing those budgets, you know, whether it's library or any other supplemental, your hope would be to have those funds that are being invested to allow them to generate more income so they don't have to come back. So ideally, you know, the cemetery perpetual care, you know, you can only spend the income. So if that was able to generate enough money because they need the next pickup truck, they need the next backhoe, the ideal situation is to be able to generate that income or have it grow enough so that you'll be able to use that fund to pay for those items.
Okay.
So it does sound like, pulling on that there is ways we can structurally change the way we finance the town.
Correct, that's what I was getting at exactly.
It'd be a structural change?
Well, just, I guess, the way we approach how we fund the town.
I suppose. The answer would be yes, but it's just another revenue source.
Exactly. In other words, we wouldn't, it would reduce some of the theoretical tax burden.
In theory, yeah. And a lot of times, towns don't. When I was in Shrewsbury, a lot of times, departments never knew that they had this money here. And then now, as budgets get tighter and tighter and tighter, then finance committee, finance directors begin to look at other sources of revenue. So I would assume, yeah.
Okay.
Is it possible to run a predictor of sorts, or I guess, to look through all of the different accounts, to pull out what we could move into specifically, like all of the funds that we could? I know some of them we don't know specifically, like the investment accounts and whatnot, and get a relative idea as to how much, you know, the 6 or 7% conservative-ish return, to kind of get an idea as to what we would be looking at for comparison to what we've been earning on those accounts.
What you're dealing with here, with us in particular, are your trust funds. If there are other funds in those other bank accounts, certainly the treasurer could look and say, okay, can I move this over because it's ABC fund that it's designated long-term. Not having that with me, and certainly not having Mylene here, she would have to be the one that could, you know, determine, is there other ways to increase her yield on that particular fund.
Okay.
But like we said earlier, a lot of those could be just your monies that you have in the general side of that bucket one, and it's very limiting. You know, so you're limited to bank deposits and treasuries, and, you know, and PEG, as we saw, you know, that was a great move by the town to take that and invest that in treasuries, you know, because particularly where treasury yields are today.
Well,
So,
the stabilization funds are ones.
well, stabilization funds are in this trust fund.
Right.
So they're with us, and they're at that 1090 mix. They're
Right.
in that middle bucket.
Right, so if we went 60/40 or something.
And
that's-
stabilization cannot go into prudent by
Oh, it
statute.
can't. I thought
It
you
cannot.
said the middle could.
Yeah, so that's why I said you have to break off that middle bucket because of this new legislation. The stabilization, community preservation has to stay with the legal list. And that's, if you recall, I'd said, okay, there's about $1.4 million, we'd carve that out into its own account, move that into its own account, go prudent, 60/40, and then the stabilization would have to stay at that, you know, 1090. We could, I am always careful on increasing the equity yield on the stabilization, because we know what can happen. A 2/3 vote at town meeting, and then now you've just taken down $1 million because you had to buy something. So the most, being a former treasurer, I used to be the treasurer at town of Shrewsbury, the most equity I would ever want to put into a stabilization account would be maybe 20, 25 at the outside,
20, 25 what?
percent.
Okay. The vehicle stabilization fund is the same though?
All stabilization funds have to stay. So whether you call it ambulance, vehicle, if it's created under the stabilization statute, they all are the same. You just were allowed to break out for special purpose.
Okay, but PEG is outside of that for some reason.
I don't know how that was established.
I don't know, I just started. Here, but I don't know how it was established, but the PEG access, you know, that's operating. You know, that those funds need to stay liquid. The 700,000 that's in there, that's for investment. That's, I'm assuming that determination at that point in time was made, well, we can save this, we're not using that on a daily basis. You know, we'll say that first bucket, you keep saying liquid, but you have to keep in mind there's a lot of activity daily. It could be accounts payable, it could be payroll, but there's also daily changes between the revolving funds, the general funds. There's a lot of activity in the background. So in order to, that's why they're in their first bucket, and that's why you see the yield so low. There's a lot of activity. We don't have to pay the fee for that.
Is there anything statutorily restricting us from grouping together some of those accounts and just keeping the account on our books, but grouping together multiple accounts in one bank account?
That is totally the treasurer's responsibility.
Okay.
And like I said, those are the banking relationships that all treasurers have. You know, as we talked about, you know, having money in certain accounts as a compensating balance account that pays for the payroll, or you know, your account reconciliation on for payroll and accounts payable. So the treasurer will then have those banking relationships that I articulated earlier, and they will move the money around, trying to get the best rate for the community.
Okay.
And there's a very, very competitive banking industry on the governmental side, as you've seen in that sheet. And there's way more banks than what, you know, Mylene is currently using.
Okay.
There could be probably 30 or 40 banks here in the Commonwealth that are very active in the municipal market. You know,
Okay.
Unibank, Harbor One. I better not go down because I'll get in trouble because I forgot one of my colleagues. So, but there are many, many, many banks that work with your treasurers.
The main reason why I ask is we have, you know, the Security Street, we have $6,000 in there, ARRA EECG grant. We have $298 in there. Is there anything stopping us from
Yes.
Mass General Law from?
Actually, if it's a grant, it may have to stay separate.
Right, okay, fair enough. But the security streets, the deputy deposit, stuff like that, can we combine those into a single account that's earning 4% rather than 0.01%?
Again, it all depends on what the account's for. So you have all the student activity accounts.
Yep.
By statute, the treasurers have to have a bank account for each of the schools.
Yep.
And then they then transfer money out of that bank account into a bank account at the school.
Okay.
So that's what those are. Then if you have subdivisions, bond, those are all, and I don't recall off the top of my head, those would be some of your subdivisions.
Okay.
So depending on the planning board and their involvement, saying, okay, we're going to accept $200,000 in this bond from this bank. So they're all unique in some way, and you just have to, one by one, and I'm sure Mylene's done that, trying to maximize your yield.
Okay,
But again, what you're looking at is last year.
right.
Things are way different a year later. And so when you see those interest rates, you know, I'm sure they're higher. I'm sure they're higher. But we'll see what the town treasurers put out in September to see what the new rates are amongst all the banks.
Any other questions for tonight? Nope. Thank you so much. I really
Thank you very
appreciate
much.
the deeper dive.
Have a great night.
I've got one question for Ezekiel before he moves away from the microphone. On page 1 of this spreadsheet that we've been looking at, down towards the bottom, in fact, Chris mentioned it a few minutes ago, vehicle equipment stabilization, and I've seen that same designation in the new policy that we're reviewing at this point. What is that count? Which account is that? Is it what's been called special purpose stabilization up to now?
Yes, you're correct. That's the special purpose. It's the vehicle equipment stabilization. It's the two terms have been intermingled.
That, okay.
Yeah.
Personally, I've been fighting that battle for 2 or 3 years. It really concerns me that we've really changed the name of that account that the public sees, because, and again, I'm still trying to find the article that created that account, but depending on the exact wording of that article, that is not specific, although that's what we've used it for. It's not necessarily specific to vehicles and equipment. And I've been trying to make that point for a number of years, that everybody needs to understand that town meeting, I believe, the last time I got an interpretation, is that town meeting can spend that money for anything with a 2/3 vote, not just vehicles and equipment. And I always get pushback that, well, that's what we always use it for. I said, that's fine, that's what you always use it for. But I want the public to know, going forward, and you know, until it's changed, that it can be used for other uses. May not be prudent from a fiscal point of view, but there may be extenuating circumstances at some point in the future where we need $500,000, and that's the only place to pull it from.
Absolutely. I will tell you, in the general ledger, it's still called vehicle equipment stabilization. It took me some time to figure out why it's being called special purpose.
Because that's the way it was created and called out in the article at town meeting.
I'll have to pull the original article to review.
If you find it, please send it to me, because I've been trying to re-find it and I haven't been able to recently.
Yeah, I'll dig through. There's a lot of papers in my office.
All right, thank you.
All right, thank you.
All right. Next up, we have Mr. Bernard. Go over some Chapter 90 stuff. You pull up the presentation.
All right. See if I can move this so I can actually see. All right, so Bill Bernard, I'm the DPW director. I'm here to talk about Chapter 90 funding. I'm sure you have my presentation in front of you.
Yep, just open it up now so I can share. I can screen share it.
All right, so what is Chapter 90? Chapter 90 is monies provided by the Commonwealth of Mass and administered by Mass DOT. It's authorized by Mass General Law, Chapter 90, Section 34. And Chapter 90 provides funding to municipalities for the implementation of capital improvements on local public ways. And every municipality in the Commonwealth is allotted a portion of the total program dollars. So what are the funding levels? So the funding levels are established by the Massachusetts legislature and approved by the governor on an annual basis. The base amount is approved based on each of the Commonwealth's 351 municipalities and allocated overall to each municipality every year, every fiscal year, which is July 1 through June 30th. And the total amount in the program has been static since 2012. It's been $200 million. Of course, everybody knows inflation has grown, so hopefully that fund grows, or that allocation grows at some point. How much does the town of Lunenburg receive? So they have a formula to figure out how much each municipality gets, and it's 58.33% is how many miles of road you have, and 20.83% is based on population, and employment makes up the other 20.83%. So I've listed what we've received since FY20, which was $456,000, and it dropped the next year, almost $16,000. Dropped again in FY22, $415,000. A little bump in FY23 to almost $420,000. FY24, the regular funding dropped a little bit, $418,000. But then they came up with this two other programs, a fair share program, and we got $240,000 out of that, and another program called Rural Roadways Program. We got almost $22,000 out of that. And I'll explain those a little more. And then this year, fiscal 25, we got $418,000. So pretty steady for the past 5 years.
Do we anticipate getting the fair share later in the year?
That I'm not sure. I'm not sure how that legislation works. I don't know if that was a one-year thing or is.
When did we get the fair share last year, do you know?
It kicked in later. Ezekiel, do you know when it came in?
It came in about, I think it was May, the fair share funding.
Yeah, it was late in the fiscal year, yeah.
It was towards the end.
Okay.
Is there any reason why, so if almost 21% of this is based on population, we had a large jump in our population after the last census. Is that reflected at all in this? Is that the FY20 number possibly? I would expect there to be somewhat of a jump.
Well, it also depends on all the other municipalities, right? If they're
Okay.
jumping, So, I don't know, I can't answer that one.
Okay.
Probably held harmless.
Yeah.
And so, why did we get more Chapter 90 funding in FY24? Again, it was that fair share in that rural roads programs. So that fair share was an amendment to the state constitution to provide resources to education and transportation through additional taxes on millionaires. And the Rural Roadway Funding Act was another state legislation to support construction and reconstruction of municipal roadways in more rural areas. And the fair share in the Rural rural roadways funding can be used just like the Chapter 90 fundings is, that's the same. So how much do we have now? So since fiscal year 2020, we've spent $891,000. So right now we have $2.4 million. However, we've already have programs, projects approved for $821,000. And so right now, I have almost $1.6 million in funding that we can use.
Does this include the FY '25 $418,000?
It does.
Okay.
Yeah,
That 821,000 though will be reimbursed, right? It has not yet been reimbursed?
right, right. So I think I get into it a couple slides down. So
Okay,
it's
that's- all right,
it's a
I'll-
paving project, it's sidewalk project. Yeah. So the paving's been done. We sent in for reimbursement. We haven't heard back yet. Should be
When you
soon.
do get reimbursed, does that go right back into the DPW line item or just back into general funds?
General fund,
And then probably ultimately becomes free cash?
right, well, I believe so, right?
Correct, because you're essentially utilizing your general fund cash to fund the project, it's just a reimbursement. So it's an in and out.
Okay.
The net is zero.
Right. All right, talk about eligibility for Chapter 90 funding. So only roadways that are reported to MassDOT as locally accepted roadways that can be factored into the portion that we get. And those roadways, that's the only place where we can spend that money. So MassDOT says we have 82 miles of roadways. We say we have 87 miles, it's about 5 miles. We're trying to get those 5 miles into MassDOT, right? 'Cause that's more money, right?
Yeah.
To do so, you have to find the vote from the town meeting. And we tried to find some, we sent some in, they said, no, it wasn't good enough, so we're still working on that, finding the
Why
records.
don't we just re-vote it? Can't we just re-vote it?
That
if-
might be the way to do it, yeah.
Well, do we know what these 5 miles are that aren't being accepted, or?
Yeah.
Okay, so basically, maybe that's the thing, just simply have another vote, or
That's a good
confirmatory
point.
vote
I'll-
if we think that's
Yeah.
the proper way.
Yeah, I'll ask legal counsel about that, and, yeah, maybe we could do it at the November town meeting, yeah.
Yeah, with the warrant open, that should be a real simple one to write up
Yeah,
and put through.
thought.
Bill, if I could interrupt just a moment. What you just spoke about, I had down here as a note for later, but I'm glad it's in the presentation. You and I actually talked about this face-to-face sometime in the last couple of weeks. So just to be clear, what you just stated is that Chapter 90 funds can only be used on roads that have been accepted by the town. Okay, so what is the designation of the cemetery roads? They're not accepted roads, they just exist on town property?
correct,
They're basically driveways?
correct.
Okay. And then you also stated that we do have a number of roads that are not formally accepted outside of the ones we're debating about in town? Did I make any sense in that?
Yeah, so.
You've got the
that-
5 miles that you're arguing with them about one way or the other.
Yeah.
But we have additional roads above and beyond that 5 miles that are definitely not eligible.
That's
Is that
correct,
correct?
right.
The fire roads and
There's a lot of
whatnot.
fire
Yeah.
roads and private roads, yeah.
Right, okay. I'd just like to get that out there, because people do listen to these meetings, and
Yep.
they get quite a bit out of it if we put that detail into it.
Sure, that was good clarification, yeah.
Thank you.
All right, so what kind of projects can be funded by Chapter 90? So sidewalk ramps, berms, curb, bike lanes, drainage, there's a huge list. And pretty much anything on the roadway, any kind of maintenance of the roadway, different kind of paving and maintenance, chip seals, crack sealing. It can be used for traffic items, warning signs, pavement markings, pedestrian signals, and traffic signals. It can be used for bridges and culverts, and it can be used for right-of-way acquisitions. It can be used for street lighting and tree planting. And there's a lot more. It can be used to purchase equipment to maintain roadways. Just again, huge list. Anything you can think of to repair or maintain a roadway is probably on the list, right? Air compressors, cranes, excavators, generators, graders, right? Loaders. You can buy trucks. They have to be over 27,000 pounds. So
I have two questions. One, what is a riprap in civil?
Stone.
Rock,
yeah, it's
Rock?
Yeah. You see it on the side of the roads.
large.
Oh,
So we have a drainage
big rocks that are
area.
next to my house.
Yeah,
All right.
yeah.
I've never known that was what that was called for. And the second one,
Different sizes.
the tree planting and landscaping in association with a project.
Right.
What type of project are we talking about?
That
Paving
might be-
project, or can you, like a park project?
No, well, park's not a road, so,
But do we consider the entryway into Marshall to be one of our paved roads?
it would be a driveway.
It is?
Yeah, it wouldn't be an
Okay.
accepted roadway, yeah. It would be like a complete streets project where you're putting new sidewalks, you're putting bicycle lanes. There might be a grass strip between the roadway and the sidewalk. You might want to put plantings in there. You might want to put trees in there. That's where that would be used for.
Can you use it for engineering, like to actually develop plans or?
You
to-
can, that's the next slide. Right, so the next slide, so transportation engineering design. So one of the projects I have out there now is a sidewalk project. So I'm using Chapter 90 money to pay the engineer for that project.
Bill, which project?
That was the one that was the ARPA money.
Also Northfield
So-
Road,
Yeah,
over near Turkey Hill.
yes.
Okay,
That
thank you.
the school committee requested ARPA money.
The only reason I
tie-ins
brought
of
that
the
up is that
sidewalks.
there's been discussion about 3 different locations for sidewalks over the past couple of years. That one that you're talking about, Highland Chestnut Street improvement that way, and
Yeah.
then over in Whalum at the Rotary. So I just wanted to verify which project you were talking about right now. Thank you.
Right. And then also in that project, I'm going to tie in maintenance of some of the existing sidewalks we have. And what else? You can use the money for planning purposes, and you can do other consultant services, and you can use it for garages and parking facilities, and pavement management, and salt storage sheds. Talk about the roles that MassDOT and the town plays and how it works. So MassDOT provides guidance and assistance. They manage.
If we had a MART stop, could we pay for parking associated with it?
Can you say that again?
If we have like that MART bus that drives around and picks people up, if we put a MART stop at Marshall Park, could we make that the parking lot?
Related to mass transportation, transit service. You might be able to. Yeah, maybe.
Then can we put plants on the side of that?
That maybe. Maybe.
Well, for creative.
Yeah, anything to bring the cost down.
Yeah. I can ask the question to MassDOT. So back to the roles. MassDOT manages contracts and accounts. They confirm eligibility, so if I want a project, they have a new web portal, it's called Grant Central, so I put the project in there. It gets approved online. It used to be all paper. Now it's online, so that's better.
Is it all reactive or proactive? Do you have to have already spent the funds before you can actually see if you would qualify for it?
No,
Okay,
nope, we have to get qualified first,
before you can even do the project.
correct,
Okay.
right. And sometimes you want your contractors to be pre-qualified, so the maintenance, the paving contract I put out, I went through, asked for Chapter 90 funds, they said yes, and then we had to get a list of pre-qualified contractors for that. So MassDOT does that, and then once we do the work, request the money, they disperse the money to us. So it's our job to plan and prioritize projects. We have to submit project requests, like I was talking about. It would be our responsibility to hire consultants to design the project, or I'll try to do a lot of them in-house myself. And we have to advertise and get the contractors. We oversee the work, and then we request reimbursement. This is just a follow-up on that, the implementation process. Again, we have to request a project. A lot of times you want pre-qualified contractors. Right, and again, we have to procure the contractors. We have to oversee the work, and then we request reimbursement.
Does it all have to be done within the same fiscal year?
It does not.
And again, I just want, so the process from our perspective is we would give you the $600,000 or whatever we give you for road maintenance. You would seek to do some of that road maintenance out of this.
So Chapter 90 would be on top of the 600.
But you would have to pay out of your budget before you get reimbursed, right?
Correct.
How would that work, though, if you roll over between fiscal years?
But we pay out of the general fund, right? Ezekiel, right? It would come out of the general fund, and then when we get reimbursed, it goes back into the general fund.
Okay, but that's, Ezekiel, is he talking about appropriated funds that he's using, and we don't get reimbursed for them until the next fiscal?
The way it's set up in the general ledger, we have the Chapter 90 funds set up as a separate bucket. So essentially, you're using the town's cash to fund the project, and it's coming out of this separate account that we have. It's not a bank account, it's line item in the general ledger, and it gets reimbursed. So it's, like I said earlier, it's a net zero. So that's how that works. So we track the amount spent through that fund in the general ledger.
Okay, so when they close out, that account doesn't get calculated into,
Correct. It doesn't get calculated in the overall free cash certification. It gets rolled into the next year, the funds. It's treated like a grant.
okay, thank you.
And I wanted to say, since I'm up here, the fair share, I said May, time is going by way too fast. It's actually, we received it June 24th.
And we will be getting it again in theory, because it's the millionaire's tax. It's supposed to be,
Annually, shouldn't it?
right, it's supposed to be self-funding on an annual basis. It's that 1.6 billion that they got.
Yeah, I'm assuming, yeah,
It may change the amount, but we should expect to see something
hopefully.
on a yearly basis.
But last year was
Changes from year to
June.
year.
Last year was the first year, so it was
Yeah.
Right.
probably building the fund that first year before appropriating it to the towns.
So was it only Chapter 90 money in that fund? That could,
So the Chapter 90 money, so we keep record of these separately, so we have the Chapter 90 fund, we have the fair share and the rural rates. We also have the RAP grant, which is a separate entity as well.
Because the fair share is not eligible for reimbursement with Chapter 90 funds.
No, the
correct?
fair share, it's an upfront.
It's an upfront money, but it has to be used for roads and whatnot.
As you
Transportation.
spend, correct me if I'm wrong, you have to report out what you spent it on.
Okay.
Right.
You know, as we go through the capital planning process, I think we got to bring these Chapter 90s and other kind of in front of the committee as potential funding sources for projects, because if there is an additional funding source besides free cash, you know, we may want to, you know, acknowledge that and bring it forward as a potential project, or seek funding for that project that way. So just kind of I don't know, I think we've talked about that before amongst the board and at the capital planning.
Well, are there some capital projects that have been approved that are Chapter 90 eligible?
Well, like the air compressor was one that was, I think you just missed the cut or something on that this year.
Right,
And then you had like jackhammers or something, right, didn't you? I mean, that
right,
should
air
be,
compressor and jackhammer. So I did purchase that with Chapter 90 money,
yeah.
so we have that now.
Bill, you're engineering for like culvert projects that are engineering 1 year and the project the next year. That's all eligible also, isn't it?
It would be, yes.
Yeah. So we've done
Yeah,
multiple projects like that, and we've done it through free cash, whereas Chapter 90 funds can be used. Yep. I agree. We really need to take a deeper dive into revenue sources when we're looking at those projects. Thank you.
especially once we get those 5 extra miles.
5.3 extra miles.
All right, so the following, the last of the slides is kind of where I envision spending the money in the next few years. So the FY '24, which we just came out of, right, that $800,000+ is here, right? So I use it to mill and pave a number of roads. I purchased the air compressor and have a contract with an engineer to design the sidewalk job. That's what you see here. So FY '25, which we just started, going to use it for roadway maintenance, fog sealing on a number of roads. I have a bunch of drainage improvement projects, which I had on my capital planning list, and potentially they could come out of here. And once I get the engineering done on the sidewalk project, you know, we have to pay for the construction somehow. We'll pay for it out of Chapter 90. I talked about this a little bit, about the pavement management. So we have a pavement management program. Our consultant, they would call Beta Group. So they forecasted how much we were going to spend each year. That's the blue columns. So the white is what my budget is, so the yellow makes up the difference in Chapter 90 funding. So in FY '25, I'll need a little bit. FY '26, need 47,000. In FY '27, need 62,000 to supplement our budget to meet the goals of the pavement management program.
Does that have a ceiling at any point in the plan where we stop adding 50,000 every year?
It was my understanding we were going to stop at $1 million.
Okay.
Well, but this beta estimate, this is actually, they went out and surveyed all the roads, and this is their estimate over the next
Right.
5, 7, 10 years or
That's how we
something.
ended up with the $50,000 incremental increases, right?
No, I think that this is recent, right? This one you just did.
Right, we did it.
Oh, that's right, because it just expired. We made it through the 5-year plan.
Yeah.
So this was the new one, okay.
Right, so this is the new plan. It started in FY '23.
So Bill, the supplemental amounts, is that driven more or less by cost increases? More than total work you expect to do in each one of those years?
It's a combination, yeah.
I wasn't looking for specifics, a yes or no is fine, thank you.
Actually, if we continue to get that amount of money.
That's what I'm saying. We should be getting something similar to that on a yearly basis. Unless we drive all the millionaires out of Massachusetts.
Well, that's happening.
That's happening.
Yeah,
That's what they say.
enough is enough.
We're gonna have long ambulance rides too.
So going forward, I tried to predict how much money was gonna come in, so I just chose 415,000. Hopefully that's on the light side. And again, looking to do roadway maintenance, Fox Hill. I have bridge repairs in there. So right now, we have a consultant working on a bridge plan. They went out and inspected our bridges. Now, they're going to come back with recommendations on what work needs to be done and try to prioritize that. I went out with them, looked at the bridges when they went out. They're in tough shape. We're going to need a lot of work. I have $450,000 there. That won't get you too much on bridge repair. Not going to get you too far. Some of the bridges will need replacement, and note that some of them are going to be multi-million dollars.
Could you do a comprehensive study on, like you did with the roads for bridges?
That's
To predict what we need to do in the next 10 years?
Similar what we're doing, yeah. Maybe not as comprehensive, but a similar program. Right, we're looking at the condition and coming up with cost estimates of what it would cost to fix them or replace them, and then prioritize. Very much like the pavement management plan.
But I don't see anything in here that says you want to bring in an outside consultant to,
It's already in process.
oh, it is in process?
Yeah, yeah, I expect to have the report, I think they told me in October, November.
Oh, okay, good.
Bill, have you got any, I know we've been picking away at critical pending failures the last few years to do with culverts and bridges. Do we still have critical pending failures that are going to have to be jumped on in the next 3 years or so?
I would say yes, yeah.
I'm not asking you to identify them because people get all freaked out, but I'm just wondering if we have a lot of them or just
Yeah,
a couple or...
There was some, I'll say, funky designs out there.
Yeah, but is it design failure or is it structural failure? That I'm more concerned about structural failure.
I don't think we're gonna have any structural failures, but, yeah, there's stuff that needs to be updated.
Yeah, okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
And, you know, drainage pipes, I'm forever fixing drainage pipes. Right, we just did one out on Malpas Road. We'll be on Whalen Road in a couple weeks, so.
I think I read or heard a report, as you know, up in northern New Hampshire, over to, especially towards the Vermont border and over into Vermont, they're totally rethinking their engineering for drainage and those types of things. And I don't know what the multiplier is, but the increased volume required now in engineering for those types of projects is, you know, out of this world, because the water runoff they're getting in a matter of 4 hours, there's just no way the systems can handle it.
Yeah, and I've been saying that here in front of this board, select board and others. Yeah, the drainage in town, it was put in 50, 60, 100 years ago, and it worked, but it's not working now.
Right.
The storms are different.
Yeah, the only concern I have is, and the challenge is to balance how much money and how much infrastructure you're going to improve in that direction, is the fact that the events up in that area anyway, over a 3-mile period, 3-mile stretch of land, you've got a difference in rainfall of 1 inch, 3 inch, 8 inches in the same 6-hour period. So
Yeah,
what are we going to do? Put
yeah,
60-inch drainage culverts
everywhere, yeah.
all over New England?
Right, you can't do that, obviously. Yeah, and that happened, what, September 11th, Lemonster at 11 inches, we got about 6.
Right, right. Yeah, we had an event up there in New Hampshire and spilled over into Vermont, and it was incredible.
Yeah. Yeah, so how do you design for that?
Right.
You can't really, you gotta do what's prudent, right?
So I think this is really good. I think that fair share, we need to kind of try to get an estimate of how much we should expect in that fair share at what periodicity we actually get those revenues. Because that could
Yeah,
really
definitely.
augment this plan.
Yeah, that'll change this plan significantly.
Is there a way of reaching out to someone in the state to understand how that is going to occur?
Yeah, I'll start with the MassDOT district office, see if they know about it.
Well, you can take a look at what, I mean, they brought in 1.6 billion last year. If you look at if it's the similar appropriation this year, you could at least get an estimate from it. I don't actually know what was appropriated in the budget for it this year.
I don't know if I'd count on that
So
so much.
FY '27, '28, '29, '30, they all kind of look the same, right? I put in the 415,000 anticipated. I put money into drainage and pavement management, basically, right? That's what 27 is, 28's the same, 29's the same, 30's the same. It's hard to predict how much we're gonna get, but we know there's gonna be drainage, indoor bridge repairs in those years.
Are you about to make us happy?
No, I was just looking at the fair share
Yep.
amendment. So this recent funding, 100 million went to each of the 351 municipalities. 50 million is just distributed based on the Chapter 90 formula. The second 50 million is distributed using a formula based solely on each municipality's share of road mileage. So that's how.
So we really want those 5 miles.
We got to get those bios.
Was that last year?
Can we steal a few miles from another town to
Ezekiel,
buy roads?
Jay was asking if that was last year.
For 24.
The 23 formula, that's what the 23 formula is funded in 24. Like I said earlier, the 23 is to build the bucket, and 24 to distribute it, the 100 million.
But fiscal year '25, we don't know yet.
It's, guessing it's going to be the same formula. I can forward the link to that.
So we should be expecting $250,000.
I think so.
Unless something drastic changed.
I don't know.
How much funding we get?
I read something in the governor's budget that they're looking at that money for, it's gonna be fair for something else. I don't know if I'd rely on fair share.
I thought it was written in the law what it could be used for.
Yeah, transportation and schools.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you're thinking
I
it's
read-
going
I
more
read-
towards schools?
No, I think it had something to do with the cost of this new, the immigration and managing those people and school, having to do with the schools and transportation, being involved with that. I remember reading something in the paper about they're looking at that money as an alternative. So it's still gonna be transportation schools, just not how we have been traditionally using it. Don't hold me to that, but I know I read something somewhere in the paper about something changing in the budget.
Yeah, I mean, we should run that to ground, and we should be talking to our legislators to make sure that that does not happen. I don't know how well that works, but... All right.
All right, any other questions?
No, very good, thank you.
I just have one question. So I noticed in the later years, we're spending down Chapter 90, basically all the way down. Is there a reason why we were sitting on 2 million, 2.5 million for so long without spending it?
Well, before I arrived, I don't know.
Okay.
Since
Once you
I
got
arrived,
here,
I'll take a little blame for that, as, kind of new at this.
Yeah.
So
Okay,
it took me a while to realize it was there and get going on it,
okay,
so.
okay. It's not current practice now is to spend it, to use it,
Right,
because it doesn't do any good sitting in the bank.
right.
You don't get money on it.
Well, it doesn't do any good sitting
Not
in.
in our bank.
In the,
Right, it's
in
in
the
the
Commonwealth's
State's bank.
bank, exactly. All right, thank you so much.
I've got one other thing, a little bit off, tiny bit off subject, but I haven't been following it close enough to know where we're at. There was quite a bit of rumbling a year or so ago about bringing forward a stormwater department or entity of some sort in the near future, is what it sounded like a year ago, and I haven't heard much at all about that. Did it just get tabled while we got through our fiscal mess, and it'll come back up around again in a year or so, or?
Yeah, so the Stormwater Task Force has been meeting regularly, talking about establishing a stormwater utility.
Utility, that's what,
So, yeah, we want to get it in front of a town meeting. It won't be this year, maybe in the spring, right? Or I think we need to do a little PR on that, public relations, get people to understand what it is, what it's going to pay for, how it's going to help.
okay. And please correct me if I'm wrong, because I hear a lot of numbers at that time, and it may change by the time it comes forward to town meeting. The initial launch for that utility is in the $1 million range? Is that what it was? And I'm saying that's the
Potentially,
launch, that's not necessarily the expense year to year, but to launch it and get it set up properly.
Right, so it'll probably be less than that. There'll be a user fee, like you pay for your water, you pay for your sewer, you're gonna pay for your stormwater. We want to keep it under $100 per household. Businesses, because they have huge parking lots, huge buildings, they should be paying a little more. We're working out formulas for that. There's different ways to calculate it.
Okay. Again, just a little piece to get it out to the public now, as you say, PR. If they hear a little bit now, a little bit 6 months from now, and then when you really push it a year or so from now, they will have been exposed to it a little bit at least.
Right, if anybody's following the Stormwater Task Force, you can see what we're talking about there.
Right. Great, thank you.
One thing I had heard on that is that there was thoughts of, how much driveway you have. But I think it should be driveways that head into the road, not driveways that head into your
Well, that's one way
Garage.
to calculate a fee, right? You look at impervious surface, so your driveway, your roof. That's a lot of work, right? We'd have to hire an engineer to look at every property in town.
Yeah,
Be a lot easier to say, how about $60 per household? But then calculate the impervious surface for businesses, because obviously they have way more than a typical homeowner, right? They're causing a lot more runoff than a typical homeowner is.
It's kind of like a split tax rate type of setup.
Yeah.
And the rationale that you're saying right now makes sense to me, but I'd have to digest it a little more.
So for FY '25, it looks like it's still 100 million in supplemental Chapter 90 for cities and towns. So the same as it was for this year, and then also another 75 million for regional transit, not that one. The same as last year for both of those two different accounts. So,
Yeah, hopefully we get that.
Yeah.
And hopefully what Jay read is wrong.
excellent. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Bill, one question.
No, never mind, just kidding.
Bridge repairs, how do we qualify for small bridge grants for this bridge work?
Yeah, you have to apply. So we have a small bridge grant now for the bridge work at Flat Hill, the Catacomb Bridge, Brook. By the way, that work should be starting in October. Still trying to get a schedule out of my contractor, but that's when the water in the lake is lowered, so that's when they'll be starting. So I think you can only have one grant at a time, so we'll have to finish that one out, and the bridge management program we're looking at, that'll tell us which one we should target next, and yeah, I'll apply for another grant.
Okay.
And there may be other grants out there, so we'll keep looking.
We have access to grant writing services now. We don't know what to do with them or how to get them, but we have them.
We don't actually have the grant writing service yet, do we?
We have the money for it.
We have the money, we don't have to have the consultant.
Better run.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, so next up is budget review process, suggestions for improvement. I did find out that the interim town manager went home sick today, so that's why he's not here. What we talked about 2 weeks ago was the possibility of tripling up instead of doubling up.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ezekiel.
Thanks, Ezekiel.
Tripling up instead of just doubling up on our presentations during budget season to try and get us a few more weeks of time at the end.
Yeah.
We've also discussed, I have notes on it. Do we create a template that we distribute to all department heads to, whether it's even just, this is kind of the outline of what we want, 10 minutes of this, 10 minutes of this, 20 minutes of this, out. Do we have a time limit associated? So I wanted to have this conversation with Carter because I think it's going to really depend upon what he decides to have as well, and what his intentions are. But I do want to be able to present something to him, at least for our preference.
Yeah, one thing I was thinking is, well, two things. One, the first was, last year, sometimes we were confused as to whether they were presenting their desired budget, the needs budget, the town managers, so we should stick with one on that.
And that's one of the reasons why I think a template. We say, please do a slide of this, a slide of this, a slide of that. Anything else you want to do in your 10 minutes of allotment, feel free, plug whatever you want. But please make sure that you are showing us this, this, and this with needs-based or whatever we decide.
Right. And, the other one I was thinking about today is Monty Tech, we might as well just do now, because in the end, all they say is, here's your bill. So why bother doing it at the end of the year? We probably should do it before they do their budgeting, so that we get input into the budget versus just, here's what it is.
Everybody else decides. Well, we do have a vote, right?
Yeah, we have one vote.
It's true.
Fitchburg has 3.
We have a vote, though. It's kind of like the teachers and the health
We just don't have an
insurance.
input in. I think the way we do it now, it comes after all the votes. I think we should do it before the votes, because then we can advise. Maybe we can influence. Otherwise, why even bother with it? I mean, just send, it's always nice to hear what they're doing, but we could do that in May, because there's nothing we can do about it.
I would be fine with that. I'm also fine with, if that's not an option, is there any reason to have, do we need to have Monty Tech come in and tell us how much we need to pay them?
I don't think it's time critical. Because it's just a bill in the
Right.
end.
It's not an advertisement for something in the town. It's not saying like, here's what the library is doing for the community, here's what the Council on Aging is doing for the community, here's why their money is needed. It's saying,
Yeah.
you're gonna pay us this money regardless. You can send a couple kids here. See you next year.
Yeah, and it's always nice to hear what they're doing, but it's at a time when we just don't have the time for, so. Again, my recommendation might be to bring in our rep prior to their budget season.
Which is probably coming up in the next few months.
I don't know, yeah, maybe. And then maybe get a final report even later, because it's,
Or we could even just do the final report, could just be tacked on to sort of the what Heather used to do with her final one, where she would just kind of lump in a couple different categories together and kind of just run through them. We could just say, oh, by the way, here's the final Monty Tech number.
And then, you know, with schools, we met with them several times this past year. We may need a preliminary meeting with them to see how they're, I mean, to some extent, last year, I think we were like the arbitration board between town manager and the superintendent, but
That's what our charge is, right? The natural arbiters. I'm curious to see what Dr. Gilson, she's the new finance director, what her method is for budgeting and getting all of that together. Because I think a lot of it may also depend upon when she has what she needs put together. I have no idea when that's going to be. They usually present to the school committee in December, November timeframe with at least something. The trouble with having them in earlier, though, is that unless it's approved by the school committee, it's really tough to justify having them come in.
yeah, I don't think you need to have them come in and give them the full thing, but it may be wise for them to hit on the top issues that if they're dealing with anything this year like they did last year.
Ideally, I'd like to also back that up from same issue that we run into every year. We talked about this as well, is we have like this past year, we had it on the 21st and the 22nd, or the 20th and the 21st. Wednesday and Thursday, school committee was on, or school department was on Thursday. The next week, we had our public hearing, and then that Monday after that weekend, we had our report due.
Yeah, I
4
think you
days
gotta
after.
take 3 weeks out of the schedule at a minimum.
And that's sort of one of the reasons why I was saying, do we try to backdate weeks up, start earlier?
Yeah, I agree.
Do we try and triple up so we get them done even faster? I think if we're limited by the school department, we could at least do the town side farther in advance. And then we at least have 50% of the budget that we could work off of. We could at least address that in a report to start with. And then we have the school, which it's effectively sort of in a way like Monty Tech. Because it's presented as a single budget, single line.
Right.
Has the interim town manager made any changes to the schedule?
Not that I've seen, no.
And I think he should make a recommendation on what he thinks it looks like.
Well, in his interview, he said it should be 4 months.
Yeah.
So if we consider the start of that to be, call it October, November, should be done January, February, which allows you to have a town meeting in March or April, like some towns do.
Well, it allows us to debate things too.
Well, that's what I'm saying. For us, with our charter, we have plenty of time to actually discuss stuff and allow for changes to come through and work on them.
Yeah.
Versus cram it all into the very end and scramble and then say, we don't know what we're doing.
Well, the town manager's budget is preliminary is January 14th.
That was Heather's.
That's Heather's, though.
Well, I'm going by what's on here. Is it the 5-year financial forecast and capital plan? Looks like we don't even start anything until after special town meeting in November.
Okay. Yeah, I will reach back out to Carter and see if I can get his opinion. I'll just set up a meeting with him and actually talk with him in person, to go over what his idea for, at least what his experience or his previous timeframes were when he's back in the office again.
Do you think, or as part, excuse me, as part of that conversation, maybe plant the seed that this schedule here gets reworked based on his intent, so that we're not looking at this all the time saying, oh, this wasn't produced by the person who's actually going to be bringing this schedule forward.
Right.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
From what I've gathered, he's sort of working towards special town meeting now. He's kind of getting that up and running and trying to make sure that there isn't a need for reappropriating or anything like that. He wants to be able to do everything that he can with special town meeting now.
Yeah.
Sort of where his focus was.
Seeing as you mentioned that, I'm a little bit concerned, because I've heard him say it 2 or 3 times, that his goal is to go into special town meeting without appropriating any new money. That concerns me a little bit until we know a little bit more. Because there's almost always a need for adjustments in November, and that's why we have that. I mean, it used to be, well, if we need it, we'll have it. Now it's an annual. We need that every year. And I think we're gonna, in the next month or two, I think some numbers are gonna come out, and some new contracts are gonna flush out that were not as devastating as we expected. So I think there's gonna be money out there that's gonna either need to be reappropriated, or it ends up letting it fall to free cash. And, you know, my feeling is we revisit what got cut in anticipation of huge increases in contractual, possible contractual increases that I'm hearing through the grapevine that some of them are not actually happening, or they're nowhere near as bad as the predictions.
Is that the trash?
I wasn't gonna say it, but I'll say it anyway, yeah.
Well,
How much cheaper is my trash for the
I mean, if you're hearing it, it's not super secret.
Yeah, no, but I think we're gonna see that in a number of things. I
That'd be
think you know, last year was a year where I think we padded money into the budget in a number of places, even as much as we said that, you know, our fiscal position was not in good shape. I think there's still plenty of money hiding in our budget that we'll see roll out to free cash if we don't reappropriate it somewhere.
Yeah, he sent me an email earlier saying that he's trying very hard to avoid any raise and appropriate or free cash transfers at the fall town meeting. So.
I'm wondering why is what.
I wanted, I mean, I would.
Good question to ask.
I really want to have him in here so we can find out what his budgeting practices are like.
Yeah.
I still have no idea.
Just so I don't forget to bring it up, as my watchdog hat is on right now, and we talked about this, I think, our last conversation about smart growth with Heather, I believe it was that we needed to make sure that we applied to that process.
September
And
or
can we check to make sure that we've done that, or we don't miss a deadline, so that, you know, oh gee, next year, oh, we're not getting that smart growth more because we didn't go through the process more than we're not eligible. If we have to, we'll have to move some kids into that project so that we make the numbers.
You volunteering?
I don't have any kids, I'm sorry, or eligible kids, excuse me.
Could be a foster.
True.
Well, that's true.
All right, I do want to workshop then, I mean, well, before I say we want to workshop, is there a general consensus about putting together some type of a template for presentation so that they are more consistent from department to department?
I think that makes a lot of sense, and, you know, this would be the first year it's done, and see how it works and tweak it for the next year.
Yeah, I'm good with that. I'm not volunteering for it because I'm a little taxed right now.
You didn't have to
I
start the
mean, the
meeting today.
alternative is we wait till the new town manager comes in to do it, but
Yeah,
I do
Yeah,
think
get some
we,
input from him on
yeah,
what he's looking for.
I do think at a minimum, though, we need that consistency at what we're looking at.
but I think even with the new town manager, they're going to be asking for what they need from the department heads to develop their budget. I think that's not necessarily what we need to have presented to us.
No, but if they come in and they have something that, hey, this is what I've used.
Oh, they've already got a
forever,
template.
It's really good, and I won an award for it, then,
Wow, we should hire that person.
I don't know if there's awards for that, but.
Well, I have a feeling that we're probably going to have Carter on at least through the winter. That's my suspicion.
Yes.
I think he'll be here for at least 6 months, which means it's going to be his budget this year. So that's another question for him then. Okay.
It's gonna be up to the Board of Selectmen, I'm sure, but if we do go past December into January, or, you know, in, sometime into next year, I hope they build in some overlap, because he's gonna be the one that, you know, as you just said, has gone through the process to get it to whatever point it is that the transition's made. And, you know, if it's any time after March, a new town manager coming in and getting on board to go into town meeting with the budget that was created by another person is, without them there, is gonna be impossible. Or not impossible, but difficult.
I'd say impossible. I would call that, I would not want to do that. I'd start April 7th.
It's either that or we get a new rendition of the budget a month before town meeting.
Stranger things have happened. Okay. So depending upon what I hear from Carter then, I will probably put it on the agenda for our next meeting to, if there isn't a magical document that already exists, I'll put it on the agenda for workshopping it. I'll see if I can find something on other finance committee websites too. Maybe there's something already out there. That award-winning one. Just poach that one. All right. Any suggestions for improvement? For the budget?
Improvement to the budget?
Budget process specifically.
Process?
Darn,
I know, you almost had your chance.
I had my head spinning to come up with a quirky answer, but you changed it too quick.
No, again, I mean, there's the financial software and the reporting, and,
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know if Carter has any takes on that either, but.
There's been a lot of talk about it, but I really think it's important that this town get to a point where everybody's, and that's basically what you're talking about, but everybody's working with the same systems, same softwares, they talk to each other, they interact with each other. You know, as we saw last year, there's 10 times more work being done because they're not interconnected properly, or they're not the same system. I saw that in private industry 30 years ago, where this department was doing it this way, and back then it was very little on computers, but it was still being handled very differently, this department, that department, that department, and you couldn't merge any of that stuff. So, you know.
Well, the budget software is definitely something I know the budget task forces, that's one of their big items. The other issue is, I guess, schools use Google, we use Microsoft, the town does, and it's a budget thing, they get a discount and the town doesn't, so the question is, I don't know if that's important. Do they, is that, I mean, is that hard enough Would it cause more trouble if you switched over, that everybody had to switch over to the other thing? It's a very big project, but the budget, the software budget, I think is a no-brainer.
Yeah, it's been interesting, because we're using this, because Dr. Burnham is running the Google Drive for the Budget Task Force, and Ezekiel, Renee, and myself all had to get, and Carter, all had to get school email accounts so that we could get into the Google Drive, so that we could then see the documents that are in there. It's just one more layer of yeah, I agree. But I'm sure there's plenty of reasons why they don't want to merge the two for that one as well. But I was under the impression that the school department uses Munis still.
That I'm not sure.
They had a presentation
Use
on
it
it.
for payroll, but
They had a presentation, I believe, a couple weeks ago. So maybe there is more overlap than we know. It's just
Yeah.
Munis doesn't seem to be working so well.
One of the concerns or problems with migrations quite often, and I don't know that, I'm not an expert at it by any means, but some of these migrations that we've gone through recently, once you get past the migration and you do all the busy work to transfer your existing documents from the old software and manually transfer them into the new software, because they don't automatically merge, apparently. That's the pushback, that all of these documents that a particular person in one department has stored in one set of software has got to be converted over one by one document at a time in many cases, into the new software. Once you do that, then everything's great, but it's either that or you gotta have two computers and jump back and forth between the two.
Yeah. All right. Anything else on this one for tonight? It's already getting late. I'm happy, unless anyone wants to talk about it, I'm happy to skip over the financial policy manual draft again.
Sounds good.
We've gone through a whole bunch of financial stuff tonight. Do we have an update from the town manager search committee?
Yeah, so we met with the chiefs. We invited all the department heads. The chief showed up. A couple of the other department heads sent letters on, what they would be having us look for as it relates to a new town manager. A lot of it just came in on, collaboration and communication and helping with, employee morale and stuff like that across the board. Recognizing that we're not really a small town. That was kind of one thing that kind of came out. And what's that?
what was that?
We think of ourselves as a small town, but we're getting up to be a pretty large town, is kind of the thought, don't think of us just as a small town, so. I mean, I don't know that there's an official designation and we cross some threshold, but there's a lot to be dealt with across the town.
Town clerk gave me a number of just over 9,000 registered voters.
Really?
And I think our population is pushing close to between 11 and 12,000. So, yes, we
We
are,
have 9,000 registered voters?
that's what you gave me for a number this morning. I thought it was in the 8,000.
I thought it was in the 7,000s.
2%.
Well, I guess I better get an official number.
They also, a lot of people said, yeah, you need strong financial, but we got Izzy now, and, they kind of said, like, the leadership aspects of things, the management aspects of things was kind of the really important thing. So that was the input from the department heads, and superintendent also gave an input. They were all read out, if you want to hear them all. It should be recorded, and hopefully you can hear it. Peter had his laptop on one end and they sat at the other and talked, so.
I got through the chief's part of it, and then I had to interrupt it, but the audio for those were pretty good. It depends on whether or not the person has a soft voice that's sitting at the far end of the table.
Yeah, Chief, at least Campbell has a pretty loud voice. And he'll only be our chief until October, so I don't know, he also kind of made that. So, he'll be a big loss to the town, in my opinion. The other thing we talked about there was the RFP for the consultant to help us through this. So there was a document put together by Julie for an RFP or whatever it's called. It was sent out to 4 firms. Replies are due by noon on September 5th. I do think if they're compliant, it's low bid. I don't know what makes it such that some bids you can have other criteria or not, but this one has, you can exclude someone because you deem them non-compliant, but other than that, I think it's low bid, so.
Are they non-compliant if you don't like their bid? What's the compliance
They have to
rule?
respond to certain.
Well, so there's basic requirements that we had in there.
Okay.
So we said
So if they
something
don't
like,
hit a certain percentage
you
of those?
should, you shall have had 3 successful town manager searches.
Okay,
So if they came in and said, oh yeah, we did it once, but we'll do it for $5,
got it. You can say they're not compliant.
yeah, we're not compliant.
Okay.
So I think that's kind of it. So we'll probably meet, I guess, the week after the 5th, I guess, and we'll select someone, they'll negotiate it, and then we'll start moving out on putting out. I think they'll have discussions with folks and do their due diligence and put out the requisitions and stuff like that, so. They'll also, help the select board and maybe the screening committee, for what a salary range is and that sort of thing, so. In my opinion, as finance committee, I think we're gonna have to be paying a lot more than we did, so I think we should maybe have a discussion as to whether we support that across the board, but, I don't know, my mind's somewhere around the $230,000 salary range, but, I don't know how my mind got there, but.
Have you guys done comps?
Comps can be hard, I think, because sometimes you'll see a town manager for a city. But these firms will have all that.
Okay.
That's what they'll help us with. And I think it's not only, it's gonna be hard to find a comp on a town with as much turnover as we've had, as much, internal issues that we're kinda maybe dealing with right now, so. I think salary may be, my opinion, we should be ready to be considering higher salaries than what we've had historically for us, so.
Are these firms strictly Massachusetts, or are they regional?
They don't
national?
have to be Massachusetts, but we did say that they had to have done searches.
Okay.
So, and we had something in there about, in the north central region.
Okay.
I don't know how we enforce that. We had a little bit of debate on that, but that's just because I'm an engineer.
I'm right there with you.
Chris, have you discussed a requirement for domicile distance from Lunenburg? Because that's something that was dropped a number of years ago, and I think that was a big mistake. We used to require that a town manager and/or CAFO or whatever we had move to Lunenburg. I believe it was actually moved to the town of Lunenburg within a period of time after they were hired. Maybe that's not appropriate nowadays, but,
Say, where are they gonna move? It's like,
It's gonna be hard to do.
well, if you pay them $230,000, they can live anywhere in this town. And I will make that comment that that number, in my eyes, is too high. And to jack it up just because we've had turnover, we know why the turnovers happen. And we shouldn't start paying exorbitant salaries because we've had turnover.
Yeah.
Personal opinion.
Yeah.
I'm just passing that on to you as a member of that committee.
I don't think that's an exorbitant salary, but, we did not talk about where they had to live. I've heard that Carter lived in New York City and was a town manager or
And
something.
he was driving multiple times a week, you know. It's insane.
So,
I think that could be a compensating factor. If somebody lives very far away and you ask him, do you think you're gonna move? They say no. Okay, well, that's, you know, when you guys are doing your chart on what you think, that would probably be less advantageous to somebody that would want to live around here, because if they're living around here, they're probably going to be more knowledgeable about the area, which is going to help them in their job. But there's a zillion things that make up what a good town manager would be. That's just one. So it's just, it's probably, to me, it's a thing to think about. I
But
think
Tom,
you're
you're
right,
right.
but I think
You
it's
are
probably
right.
not the only thing.
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, I can bring that feedback or, you know, public comment.
Yeah.
You tend to go to meetings.
Oh, yeah. And I was just gonna say too, it just came to my mind, I gotta get it right, is it Littleton or Lancaster, New Hampshire? I can't pin it down right now, but one of those two, towns up there, I think it was Lancaster, to tell you the truth, they were without a town manager for more than 8 months, and they hired a woman out of Maine, and she relocated to Coas County, which is right there. Of course, Coas is half of New Hampshire, but she moved to New Hampshire almost immediately, or is in the process of moving. So it isn't that people won't do it if you strongly suggest it, if the terms and the desire to work in the job here is there. The other thing is that, and I hear this, again, out on the street all the time, if you're not a local, you don't have a true solid, and you're not truly solidly invested in the town.
Yeah, I guess we could debate that, but I'm not sure I would want to live in the town I was the town manager for, especially if I had kids in the school and other sorts of things, but, yeah, town politics can be pretty nasty, and have your family be in that town could be difficult.
The
But-
difference of the 21st century versus the 20th century.
True. Anything else on the
Nope.
selection committee? Okay. So the budget task force, like I said, we met last Monday. We spoke with Bartholomew. We went over everything in far more detail tonight than we did before. We are getting a new plan presented for trash on September 3rd, apparently. So that will be coming from, I think that was from Carter, if I'm not mistaken. So that will be presented. I think September 3rd is the select board meeting. So that would probably, yeah, select board meeting. The next, yeah,
What was that date?
September 3rd, 9/3. So we looked at, we spent the most of the time looking at expenses this time rather than revenue. We compared some of Renee and Ezzy put together another presentation about the comp towns and whatnot. There was some information to pull out of it, but it was honestly just from, it was a lot harder, I think, than the income, the revenue streams to compare them. I think it was a trickier ask to try to do, mostly because the categories that money is placed into are different from town to town. There's general expenditures that seem to show, for example, Athol and Oxford both had like 20 to 25% of their budget spent on education versus, but they also had an additional like 30% spent on general So, but we have no granularity on that one, so it's a lot harder to kind of compare between the two. However, we did look at the school side of things as well, and among the school comps, we are, out of the 10 towns that we're part of, we are 9th out of 10 for the per pupil spending, and we are 10th out of 10 for salary. So we spend the least on kids and we spend the least on staff from the other comparable towns that we look at. So there was.
Mary should have stayed.
What's that?
Mary Foyle should have stayed. She would have been very excited to hear that.
What I pulled out of that was that Maynard actually is interestingly similar to our town, even though it's vastly different at the same time. I think it's like almost under 3 square miles is the entire town of Maynard, but population is very similar. Valuations are very similar. Percentages of commercial, industrial, and personal real estate is similar. School enrollment is similar. Their budget is similar. They levy, I think, 38 million, where we levy 31 million, so it's pretty similar as well there. But they're getting, I think, $3 million more in state aid than we are. And income levels are very similar, so there's a curiosity as to why Maynard is getting extra money that is not coming out here, when so many of the I guess check boxes are very similar. So I've started looking into some of that. They are a split rate community, so that's a little bit different.
Evan, do you have any idea at all what their split commercial versus residential is?
Dave, I've got a spreadsheet on it.
That's why I asked.
Come on. I've already done all this. So if we look at it from a valuation standpoint, strictly valuation, not percentage of the levy, because they are split and we're not.
Right.
So their total percentage of valuation for residential is 90.3%. We're 91.7%.
Say that again?
So Maynard's residential percent of valuation is 90.3% of their total valuation is residential, and we're 91.7. For commercial, they're 4.6%, and we're 4.1%.
Interesting.
Industrial, they're just under 2%, we're at 1.3%. Personal, they're at 3%, we're at 2.9%, and they have a split rate.
From that perspective, that's a great comparison.
That's exactly why I have this spreadsheet going.
Yep.
And I'm going to bring this to the budget task force as well.
And sorry to interrupt,
go
but that blows the criteria for splitting the tax rate right out of the water.
That's exactly what I was saying.
Pushback that we've always gotten.
Yep. So,
That's one town.
but they're not failing.
How do you know?
I've driven through Maynard. The shops are open. They don't have closed stores. They don't have
It's a
storefronts.
very valuable area.
But it's,
They're a lot closer to Boston.
They're closer to Boston, Marlboro.
Rail.
they are.
They were,
It's not the only metrics, of course. But, I mean, there's a difference of, if we were to, hang on one second. Yeah, so right now, with their split rate, their residents, even though it's 90% of the valuation, the residents cover 87.5% of their levy. Here, because it's not a split rate, our residents cover 91.7%, as you'd expect. If we were to do a split rate, and I ran a number just to get the same levy overall, us at a split rate would be at 87.1%, and they're at 87.5%. So it works out very similarly in terms of the generation. And that pulls $1.5 million off of residents. That's not a small amount of money.
So think about.
Yep. So, yeah, using the last year's evaluations, that puts residential's at like $13.38 and the CIP at 22.1 to generate the differences. So, and I mean, if you do that, I mean, if you could work into it a debt exclusion at the same time and cover what, $500,000 of that and still return $1 million to the residents.
Then 3 years from now, you get permission from Boston to impose a local income tax, and you split that for the residents in town, seniors and yeah, it's sort of a millionaire's tax type of setup, but, you know, if, I won't rant for too long, but if you really want to support the seniors and the young families coming into town, to attract young people and families into town, which, okay, the schools are gonna scream, there's more kids, but, you know, the longevity of a town is its growing families.
But we haven't increased school size. The enrollment numbers have not changed in 20 years.
I agree.
Or 10 years. They've decreased.
Yeah, I agree, but shifting that burden off of the seniors and the lower income families coming into town, and you don't have to do a lot, a couple of percent is a huge help for that demographic.
Yep.
And it also gives the town a bit more flexibility in levy capacity, because I don't know exactly how that works when you do your revenue is coming in from two types of sources. I don't know how you balance that, but you wouldn't necessarily have to levy to the limit on real estate on a particular year, so it gives you some levy capacity, and it should be able to smooth out your need for revenues. That's my thought. But unfortunately, that's a 2 to 3 year process at this point.
Well, this is a 2-month process because the assessors are going to be presenting to the select board in a few months.
Yeah.
So we'll see what the budget task force has to say about it on Monday. I'll put something together for them. So yeah, we're meeting again on Monday. I honestly don't even remember what the schedule is. It's been so much stuff going on. But I'll report back on that in 2 weeks. Grant writing services, I don't have an update on it. I haven't heard anything from anybody.
Maybe something else to ask Connor about.
Yeah,
Manager, isn't it?
yeah.
I did, just on that subject, I did have it was actually turned out to be public comment, I was out of town, but I did make the presentation to the Parks Commission, as I mentioned at our last meeting here, that I felt that they were in a position to be one of the first boards to actually try to take advantage of that service and the money in that line item by identifying some additional grants that they have not had time to pursue, and put a proposal together to the town, to the interim town manager, and say, we think that these grants are appropriate, and we feel there's more out there, but we don't have the bandwidth or the expertise, and request 5,000, 10,000, whatever, and see what happens. Because it's, you know, best we could tell, and best I've been able to tell so far, that money is directly under the purview of the town manager at this point, because it's in the general government.
Right.
So I think that would be a very good test case, and there's a huge need for additional grant money there, as we all know.
I like the idea of a marked parking lot.
Yeah,
It saves you a couple $100,000.
they actually made it. I wonder if they could do it at the senior center too. 'Cause I think the Mart actually does go from there.
They do go by there. I've seen them in there before. All right. I don't want to talk about consolidating services unless you guys do.
No.
Good.
The only, yeah, of course, I had to do something. In conjunction with that, my public comment at the select board meeting Tuesday evening at the end, and I need to make it clear that I do not intend to be the face of what I proposed Tuesday evening. And it's going to take a dedicated group to bring it forward. So unless we use one of the other ways to bring forward a charter review committee in the near future instead of waiting for the 10-year cycle. I've got to study it a little bit more. The easiest way, and might even be able to pull it off, is that the select board votes to seat a review committee. And I think, honestly, I think this is the time that a committee of that type needs to be seated and take 2 years as we step through what needs to be reworked in our town operations. I think we need to look at our operations from a totally different point of view and revamp almost everything we do, from especially the movement that has happened in the last 2 charter reviews to consolidate power to a very limited 1 or 2 people and remove checks and balances. I think those need to be the strongest concentrations as the committee is seated, and input from all the departments is probably the first step as to what issues do you have or have you seen trying to maneuver your operations, and what's blocked you within the charter. So, and that includes what we've been talking about here in consolidation, because it could be done a very much different way. It's like, I had this conversation with somebody 2 days ago. This town, the grounds that are under the purview of the town are under multiple contracts and administered by 2 or 3 departments. That's ludicrous to me. We should have a town grounds department and a separate grounds facilities, buildings and building maintenance department. Again, that speaks to the fact that we are not this little bedroom community that we used to be. We need to grow our government operations to the size of what we've grown to as a town. And if that's all done concurrently, then we could come out the end a very well-run, flourishing town. But it takes commitment.
I agree completely with the charter review. I think if you look at the MMA's Association of Town Finance Committee's first page, everything it says is that it should be checks and balances and that it should not be presented. It's like having the governor present a budget and then show it to the House and Senate and then say,
this is what it's going to be.
This is what's going to happen. There's
veto power.
Right. Or just no, it should be that the CEO produces a budget and then it goes through committee.
Yeah.
And then it gets brought back forward and then gets presented to the town.
Yeah. But not to, I don't want to interrupt you, but I was going to say, we need to apply that to what we so-called call day-to-day operations also. That, you know, what we've pushed ourselves into is this tunnel vision, and everything goes through this little tiny tunnel or alleyway with day-to-day operations, and nobody has the right, I guess is the way I'll put it, to question anything under the charter, because it's all that power is handed to the town manager through the charter.
Mm-hmm.
I've always disagreed with that, and many other people in this town, including paid employees, agree.
I look forward to you spearheading that campaign.
I just told you.
Oh, I know. I still look forward to you doing that.
I started it with, and that was my one take when I ran through the tape again, my mistake, and that is I do not intend to be the face of that. But I hope I can generate enough interest from, especially the next generation that hopefully will step up and start to get involved and run this town into the next half century even, but at least 2 or 3 decades. And that's another thing we need. We need younger brains to move us into and away from we've always done it this way.
Yep.
And into the new ways.
Absolutely.
I'm starting to think we've always done it this way as the argument for why we need to do it differently versus why we do it the same. Because I do hear that all the time.
But even, I mean, even our first half hour or 45 minutes, however long that was, discussions with Bartholomew. There's, as we see, there are things that could have been done sooner than this, but somebody had to drill down to it and find out what the ramifications are, can we do it, and so on, rather than, well, we've always done it pretty much this way, we tweak it a little bit, but we don't change things a lot. But if we don't take that extra step, or somebody doesn't take that extra step, then it's business as usual, and you, in that case, you earn 0.5% per year, or, and your money's not working for you.
Any other discussion on this one? All right, 1 set of minutes in the drive, or not in the drive, emailed to us.
Unless anybody has any edits to it, I move that we approve the minutes as presented. And I honestly don't have the, oh, you have it right there, 8/8/24.
I have not read them yet, so I would have to abstain. I don't know if,
I don't think I've read them either. I think I missed them.
have you three read them?
I read them.
I read them.
Works for me.
Do we have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, abstain? Aye. All right, approve the minutes, 3-0-2. Committee reports. I'm going down the line. Dave, you got anything?
Green Communities met Monday evening. We ended up doing it via Zoom just because of logistics. Still a little bit frustrated that it looks like we are going to go into the fall round with a lot less, applying for a lot less money than we'd like to, but we've made a fairly, it's a tentative decision, but probably we will follow through with it, that we've already skipped one because of not getting some projects we had hoped for, or at least a higher dollar number. At this point, we're looking at potentially $45,000 to $50,000 in the application. But we don't want to go a year and a half without pulling some grant money in. So potentially it's looking at, I don't remember the other infrastructure or facilities projects, but there's a few in there that look like they'll be able to come through, but they're all relatively small dollar amounts. Because of the change in the K-9 vehicle purchase, we now have 2 vehicles eligible for $5,000 worth of grant money each. So that will be in there. There's going to be some training in there for, I think they're applying for 2 people to train on, I'm going to get it wrong, business facilities management operations or something like that. There's a training, excuse me, Mr. Wander did it a number of years ago when we had it in the grant money, so that's in there. Very disappointed that it looks like we will not be able to bring either phase of the mini splits forward for a number of reasons. And I think if you want to know what some of those reasons are, please listen to the meeting, because I'd rather not hash through all of that again tonight. Lastly, to Chris, I think if the capital planning committee has a meeting where they've got a light agenda or see one in the near future with a light agenda, I think I'll do it, or Dave Blatt, or both of us would like to come talk to you guys, because there are some things that have to be considered when we're contemplating projects such as the mini splits that have to be, I'm not exactly sure. Basically, you have to be purchasing or planning to purchase equipment from a state vetted list of vendors or manufacturers of equipment. So if you take a project forward and the equipment's not on that list, you can't even apply for Green Communities money. And it isn't like, you know, that they've got mediocre equipment on these lists. They're vetted brands and so on and so forth. It's just, unfortunately, if it has X stamped on it and Y is on the list and X isn't, they won't give you any money for it. The other thing being, and we've had this argument too, is the way you bring the proposal forward. You know, potentially Green Communities could have brought money in from 2 grant rounds for the mini split system. But because we were brought into it, or we forced our way into the process too late, then it was already well known through Green Communities that the school was only going after cooling. We can't turn the clock back on that and say, oh no, well, now we're going to do heating and cooling. It was as simple as that. That's another thing that shot those projects completely out of the water for Green Communities funding. And there's, you know, a couple $100,000 that we could have brought in over 2 grant rounds for that. So my rant. And one other thing, Chris, too, for any projects involving energy savings, whoever's driving that project needs to be in contact with Unitil. And even if we don't get Green Communities funding, there's energy incentives. And if you don't ask Unitil to calculate that for you, then you don't get it. I mean, it's absolutely free money that comes through these incentive programs, and it comes directly from Unitil, I believe. So, that's my rant. We're going to meet again a week, what would that be, September 5, 6, that Monday after Labor Day, whatever that Monday after Labor Day is.
The week after that?
Yeah.
The 9th.
9th, okay, yep. So we'll be meeting on the 9th and kind of finalizing what projects we are going to bring forward. We're going to invite Kelly Brown, our representative from Green Communities at the state level, to be involved in that, because she's the one that can look at the projects very quickly and say yes, no, yes, no, yes, no.
Mm-hmm.
Don't bother here, yes, go forward with this. And then within the next meeting or two, then we will make sure we have all the data that we need for the application, and then the application goes in October. Excuse me. One more rant. One of the frustrations, and I get it from the department heads, because they have not been trained on the process that is necessary for these Green Communities grants, i.e. the data that's required that should be kept on a regular basis, not thrown together just because we're putting in an application. Fuel usage, electric usage, solar production, all that stuff. There's a database where all that stuff is supposed to be entered on a regular basis. Again, John Wanda was in on the ground floor with Green Communities, and he was, I'm going to call him the expert along with Dave Blatt, but John inputted all that information on a regular basis, so it was already there when we were ready to go into a grant round. The town has nobody at this point that I'm aware of doing that. And that's something that, you know, for the long run, we need to look at that and see who could be trained to coordinate that data entry.
A lot of that, though, has to do with the change in staffing or lack of staffing.
Yeah, oh, yes. Oh, I totally agree. And, you know, it isn't something that people walk in the door with the knowledge of, even if you hire somebody that's been in municipal government for 10 years. It's very rare that you find somebody that's been involved in that process.
Have department heads brought forth projects for green communities?
I'm sorry?
Have department heads brought forth projects for green communities?
Presently?
Yeah.
Yes, but as I said, they're the ones that are eligible are very small dollar amounts. Some are missing the energy audit if they're involved with if it's a project within a building. They also require an energy audit, because now you're required to have weatherization and whatever else you're upgrading as part of that particular project. So, yeah, there's hoops to jump through, but it's free money. Free money with a cost for applying for it.
You gotta do the work for it. It's free, but they don't just give it to you. It's free, but they don't just give it to you. You have to work for it. You
have to work a little bit for it. Right,
They want the data.
Right, and we do get support from MRPC. I mean, Karen Chapman, once it's all pulled together and the individual projects are vetted and the information is there, she pulls it all together and actually fills out the application and submits it. So it's not all on the department heads, and it's not all on the administrators here in Town Hall. We do have outside support that's also helping us too. And Kelly Brown is just, you know, she, from our perspective, she is Green Communities, because you ask her a question and she'll give you a 20-minute answer, but it's clear, concise, and accurate.
Right. Mr. Gray?
Nope, nothing.
Mr. Simeoni?
Sewer Commission met last night briefly just to ratify appointment of the sewer business manager that Carter brought forward. And they're short 2 members, and I believe the chair is also supposed to be stepping down at the end of the month. So they're looking for volunteers for their commission.
All right. Mr. Menard?
So capital planning's was supposed to meet this week. It got postponed. We are trying to get information from Carter. I think a lot of people are, and he's coming up with curves. Rob Bowen has joined the committee as the at-large member. So we're back to a 5-member committee there. The Parks Commission's had a couple meetings. They interviewed 3 design firms and selected RDLA, which is Ray Dunn's Landscaping Architects. He's the one that did the schools, 30 School Street. So he's now the design firm. But the contract's being finalized, so I guess he's not yet. They have to finalize it, and they hope to have him on board in the next few weeks. They are working with town manager to determine if they can bring the article forward for that 53D to 53E and a half that we talked extensively about. Carter was thinking that it may not be able to be done at a special town meeting, so he was looking into that.
Yeah, I heard that. I'm not sure.
Yeah, so if not, they will go forward with that. And then they said the beach is closing on Sunday, August 25th. you know, just as an aside, I know that there's been a lot of communication between that, members of that board with Izzy as well as with Carter to get them all up to speed and stuff, so. That's what they got going on.
Budget task force met. I was wrong. It was actually earlier this week. That's how bad the weeks are blending together. So it was on the 19th.
Monday, wasn't it?
It was literally just 3 days ago.
Feels like 6 months, right?
It does. I thought it was last week. We are not meeting next week because it's Labor Day, so we're meeting again on the 16th. So we will start doing, putting stuff together and start generating recommendations because we have to give something together or have something together for a special town meeting and then a full report for December 31st. Other than that, that's all I've got. Topics for future meetings?
I had one, I forgot what it was. I have to write it on my forehead next time so you can read it.
If you think of it, send it over in an email, otherwise
Yeah, I will.
we still have a boatload of stuff to get through. There are no important dates coming up, which is great. Our next meeting is scheduled for September 12th and then September 26th. I had asked the treasurer if she would be available on the 12th. And she likely will not be yet, just because they're still working on closing out the year. We won't be able to get this report until it's the middle to the end of September, before we actually get the 2024 version, the FY24 version of what we have tonight that we've been looking through. So my guess is we'll probably have her in on the 26th. So the 16th is relatively light, which is why it's probably a good night for workshopping. And then we're into October. Budget season starts early. Is there any final public comment from the public? We have Renee only.
Fell asleep.
Probably so. Any public comment from the committee?
Yeah, I've got one. Just to keep everybody up to date from at least my experience, talking with our town employees, I'm going to just come out and say this, even though the select board is being blocked from speaking to them, as far as I'm concerned, I'm a private member and a taxpayer in the town of Lunenburg, so I will talk to whoever I want to talk if they want to talk to me. And the issue I just want to keep in the forefront is that there are still serious munis issues. 2 out of 3 employees that I've talked to in the past week or so were sitting at their desk and very willing to talk with me because they couldn't do anything on their computers. Munis was frozen. I don't know, honestly, I haven't kept track of how long this has been going on, but it's just destroying the productivity of our workers and exasperating their frustration. So we have not fixed it at this point. And I dare say that if it goes on for another 6 months, we're going to see some more turnover.
All right. Any other public comment from the committee? Anybody want to make a motion?
Motion to adjourn.
Second?
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. It is 10:13 and we are adjourned. And you ended before you even got to say that.